All right, I'm going to call this meeting to order. This is the August 1st meeting of the Corte Madera Town Council. Rebecca, would you please call the roll?
Councilmember Andrews.
Here.
Councilmember Bailey.
Here.
Councilmember Ravazio.
Here.
Vice Mayor Condon.
Here.
Mayor First.
Here. Thank you. Will you all join me, please, in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. First up on the agenda is open time for public comment. This is the time that's set aside for members of the public to speak on items not on tonight's agenda. Is there anybody who would like to speak at open time? Thank you. Please approach the podium. State your name and where you live. And you've got 3 minutes.
I am Margaret Bandel. I live in Corte Madera, and I work for the Marin County Department of Child Support Services. I'm here today to share with you that California celebrates August as Child Support Awareness Month. The Marin County Department of Child Support Services is dedicated to making sure that Marin County children get what all children need, and that is support through economic security. The California Department of Child Support Services is the agency that determines paternity and establishes and modifies and enforces child support, spousal support, and medical support. Services are provided to all parents, and the Department of Child Support Services does not represent either party, but rather the interests of the county and the state. We serve both families that are on public assistance and those who are not aided, parents that are paying support and those parents receiving support, parents that are married and those that are not married, conventional families, and the less orthodox parents living in this county, in another California county, in another state, and even in other countries. Marin County has some of the most supportive parents in California. Over 78% of monthly support owed through the Department of Child Support Services is paid in the month that it's due, and that's critical. Last year, this amounted to more than $8.4 million in monthly child support made by 1,425 Marin County families. We have an award-level record of service to families in our community. For the past 10 years, Marin has ranked as one of the top 10 local child support agencies in the state. We work with parents, we work with employers, local court, and family law practitioners, other county departments, and community-based organizations to place the interests of Marin County families first. So please join me in celebrating August as Child Support Awareness Month, and anybody interested in learning more can find us at 88 Roland Way in Novato or on the web at www.childsup.ca.gov. Thank you.
Thank you. That's a very important topic.
Diane,
Yes,
can I ask you,
Absolutely.
maybe on the next agenda, we might consider recognizing this as the Child Support Awareness Month?
Sure.
Thanks very much.
That might be nice. Do you think your agency would have a sample resolution or something?
Usually the Board of Supervisors in
Okay.
Marin County does a resolution.
Okay, all right. Can we maybe
Yeah, but usually they do.
do that? Great,
Great.
thank you.
Thank you.
Is there any other member of the public who would like to speak at open time? Nope, see none. Let's move on. No presentations this evening, so let's move on to town manager and council reports. Todd, would you like to begin with the town manager report?
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. I'm actually going to defer my comments tonight to the council. I think my updates are similar to yours, so I'll defer to you. And I think the mayor has been very busy recently, so I'm going to let you do it. Thank you.
Okay. I have fire and CMSA. Is that the two you were thinking of, or is there anything else?
As well as the first pitch and the upcoming event
Oh, I
tomorrow
have to
night.
mention the first page?
Well, I think you should. It's pretty neat.
All right. Okay. Thank you. Nice and brief. Gosh, we might get out of here kind of early, huh? Wow, okay. Oh, sorry.
You're gonna jinx it.
Council member reports. I'll start with you, and it's on you to be quick. How's that?
The only report I have is my attendance, along with you, Madam Mayor, at the Fire Shared Services meeting, and I will defer to you to report on that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Carla?
Okay, and quickly, August the 27th is when the council is partnering with Age-Friendly Corte Madera to honor all those residents 90 and over. This is our third annual celebration that is hosted by Age-Friendly Corte Madera. It will be on the Sunday the 27th from 2:30 to 4:30 at the community center, and everyone is invited to honor those people. But also, if any of you have any names of anybody that might be 90 or over, please to give me those names. We have a list already, but we know it's not complete, and so we want to make sure that everybody is aware of it. Then also in October will be the Chamber of Commerce Golf Tournament, and I'll talk with you more about that at our next council meeting. On August 18th is another one of our speaker series that's held the third Wednesday of every month. And it will be at 1 o'clock, as it always is, at the Central Marin Police Facility Community Room at 250 Doherty Drive. The last time we had a great turnout. The topic was about dementia and Alzheimer's. And for any of you that might have come, I think that everybody would find it reassuring because the speaker was from the Alzheimer's Association, and she showed us how none of us have it. That that it's natural to forget where you put your keys, to go into a room and forget why you went there in the first place, and just a lot of different tips on how you can combat that. And you will find a lot of those pointers on the Alzheimer's website. So anyway, it was, again, another successful series, and we've already got programs planned through the beginning of the year, and later this month we will get together and get everything on this schedule that will go through June. So anyway, we're doing great along that way. So, but I do hope that I'll see some of you on August 27th to honor our residents 90 and over. Thank you.
Thank you.
August. Third, I knew you were going to ask me that, and that's why I have my phone here, because I don't think it's chair yoga. That one is coming. Chair yoga is coming, and how to clean up your piles and files is another one that's coming. And I'll just check with this and then maybe interrupt later on our meeting to
Sure,
tell
I'll come
what it
back to you.
is.
Okay.
Thank you.
Jim?
Nothing.
Bob?
Nothing.
Well, I'll go ahead and go. I was going to come back to you after them, but okay. I've got a few things to report. First of all, I attended the Fire Department Consolidation Ad Hoc Committee meeting, along with our town manager, Todd Cusimano, and Councilmember Sloan Bailey. We represent Corte Madera on that committee. We are moving forward to fully consolidate our fire department with the city of Larkspur to create one Joint Powers Agency, or JPA, much like years ago we created the Twin Cities Police, and then when we incorporated San Anselmo into that agency, it became the Central Marin Police Authority. There was quite a long discussion about the naming of the new agency. Originally, the firefighters had really wanted to be able to call it the Central Marin Fire Department, because there is a long tradition in firefighting for the members to be members of a fire department rather than a fire authority or fire agency. There was a lot of talk about the legal connotation of the word department as being part of a municipality. So it was finally decided that it was probably safer to use the term or use the name Central Marin Fire Authority as the name of the agency. However, I think colloquially and casually in the community, it is very likely that it will occasionally be referred to as the Central Marin Fire Department, much like we talk about the Central Marin Police Authority as being the Central Marin Police or Police Department. So, that being said, the draft JPA agreement was discussed, and I think we have really ironed out a lot of the details that we needed to address, and it will be coming to council for approval the second meeting in August, so that's in 2 weeks. The reason we're doing this so early is because CalPERS really needs that agreement. CalPERS is a very bureaucratic organization, and they need to have certain T's crossed and certain I's dotted before they can move forward with what they need to do in terms of the pension account. There are also well, let me ask you, Todd, did LAFCO issue their exception to a full, very involved financial analysis?
Yes, they verbally have approved that. It's just some paperwork that we have to fill out, and Dan, on behalf of the authority, is filling out that paperwork now, so that'll be complete next week.
Okay.
But we are
great.
exempt. Yes.
Good. So LAFCO, the Local Area Formation Commission, which is the agency responsible in the County of Marin for overseeing the formation of agencies, boundary issues, jurisdictional responsibilities, things like that. So they have issued an exception to a requirement that they do this very involved, very costly analysis. They say everything is clean enough that they can just do kind of a cursory review, I guess. So that's really good news. So let's see. CalPERS will take approximately 3 to 6 months for their process. So last I heard, we were going to be trying to get this finalized January 1st, 2018. So thank you. Any questions on that? No? Okay. I also attended another ad hoc committee meeting for the Central Marin Sanitation Agency. The Joint Powers Agency agreement that was entered into by the local sanitary districts is decades old, and much of the language in that agreement is out of date. So we're simply working to kind of update that. I represent Corte Madera Sanitary District Number 2 on CMSA. There are also representatives on that ad hoc from Sanitary District Number 1, which is Ross Valley Sanitary, Larkspur, and San Rafael Sanitary District. If anybody has any questions or concerns, happy to address those. Send me an email or talk to me after the meeting. Todd had to mention the first pitch, but last, was it Thursday, I think, was Corte Madera Day at the San Rafael Pacifics. It was a lot of fun, and yours truly got to throw out the first pitch.
Wow.
And it was a pretty good pitch, I have to say. All right. It was pretty close to a strike. I have it on video. I can prove it. I didn't stand on the pitcher's mound, but I wasn't too far forward. Anyway, it was a lot of fun. I definitely saw some Corte Maderans out there, but if you guys haven't had a chance to go to a Pacifics game, it is really a lot of fun. The ballpark is not that big, so you're close to the action. They have great refreshments there. They have fun little activities for the kids and some adults during every inning break, So anyway, good, clean family fun, and just over there in San Rafael. And then, speaking of family fun, we have the circus in town. Tomorrow is opening night of Circus Vargas. They have a really great show. If any of you saw it last year, you know what I'm talking about. It is under the tent, a one-ring circus, no animals, but really talented, amazing acrobatics and, funny things. And Carla was saying earlier about these motorcycles that, I'm sorry, that was Rebecca. I mean, just amazing skill level, and yeah, it was a really good show. So they will be here, I believe, for 2 weeks. Circus Vargas. There is a coupon code that you can use if you want to buy your tickets online. It's 2 for 1. It went out on Nextdoor. If you need the code, ask me or our town clerk, Rebecca Vaughn, and we'll get you that code if you are not on Nextdoor. So, thank you. Carla, you want to follow up on the speaker?
Yes. Thank you, Rebecca. This speaker, and it's August 16th, that's the third Wednesday. And the topic is junior units, and that's something that has been approved in town and pretty much throughout the county. And this is how you can convert one of your rooms in your house to make it a junior second unit that could provide not only income for you, but also a place where somebody who needs a place that's too expensive for them to keep their own homes can do a house share that way. It's being presented by Rachel Guinness, who is one of our Corte Madera residents, and she is the founder of the Lily Pad Homes that has become a nonprofit. She will, at the meeting, she's going to go into detail on how you can create a junior unit, and also the cost that goes into it, the requirements that go into it, and it's really easier than you think. But the whole purpose was so that seniors could afford to age in place, whether they rent out a room or whether somebody rents a room from another person, another homeowner. It's a really good idea and has been approved, and I know that Rachel is working on a statewide campaign to get this accepted throughout California. So anyway, it's junior units, another option to age in place on August 16th, third Wednesday, over at the Central Marin Police Facility. So I urge you, even if you're curious on how you might in your home develop a junior unit, I encourage everyone to come. It's not restricted to seniors by any means. But at any rate, it should be a really good program. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, let's move on to consent calendar. The purpose of the consent calendar is to group items together which are routine or have been discussed previously and do not require further discussion. They will be approved by a single motion. Any member of the town council, town staff, or the public may request removal of an item for discussion. Is there anybody that would like to remove an item? Okay, I actually would like to remove 5.2. So I will, and anybody else want to remove anything? Okay, then I would entertain a motion to approve 5.1 and 5.3.
So moved.
Second?
All in favor? I'm sorry, wrong meeting. Rebecca will call the roll. Thank you.
Councilmember Andrews?
Yes.
Councilmember Bailey?
Yes.
Councilmember Ravazio?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Condon?
Yes.
Mayor First?
Yes, thank you. Sorry, at my other meetings, we often just do a verbal vote, but okay. 5.2, all I wanted to ask on this one is that before I sign this letter to the grand jury, it's a response to the civil grand jury report, Marin's retirement health care benefits, the money still isn't there. That any approval of this response to the grand jury allows for some minor edits to the letter, because I think we're doing much better than it might have appeared in the report. For example, if you look at the grand jury report on page 33 of 37, if you just look at the graph as to the ARC, which is the annual required contribution as a percentage of total town revenue, Corte Madera is by far the largest. We're practically off the charts. But what you might not realize, unless you did some calculations like I did, is that the amount we are paying every year is more than double the rate as a percentage of total revenues. I hope I did this right. Oh, you know what? I have an ARC as a percentage of the UAAL. We are paying more than double than most other Marin municipalities. I will have to do the calculation of ARC as a percentage of total revenues. But my point is that we are being more aggressive in trying to pay it down, which is why that number is so big. But if you look at our unfunded amount from 2012 compared to 2016, the number went down quite a bit. We're being very aggressive about that, and I think we're doing really good things, and I think we should say that in the letter. So,
Understood, Madam Mayor.
That's all.
Okay. And
I just think we aren't getting enough credit on that.
And I'm sorry for putting that on the consent calendar, because I think it's always good to discuss it. Something I was impressed with looking at our colleagues in respective cities and towns. That ARC payment that you referred to, the 1.8 million, it's something also important to point out, the decision that the council made years ago to fully fund that ARC. We will lower that this next fiscal year by $700,000. And so that's important to point out. I try to keep the report not basic, but we've implemented every recommendation that they have, and we're one of the only agencies in the county that can say that. And so I felt it appropriate to put it on the consent calendar because we checked all the boxes as this report goes. So.
But I think we should put that in the letter, too. 'Cause I didn't
You're
have a
the mayor,
chance
it's
to
your
go through
letter.
that list. Yeah,
Yeah,
you know what?
okay.
I think we need to explain fully in the letter that we are actually doing really well on this, and we're way ahead of the game.
So the double payment is in effect a byproduct of 16-year amortization as opposed to the 30-year amortization that others are using.
Most other cities, is my understanding, is like, what, close to 30 years, 28 years, 30 years?
We're one of the only ones that
Yeah.
have picked this path.
So I think that should make it in the letter, too.
Okay.
Although I didn't go through and actually look up every jurisdiction, so, but if you have that, go for it. All right, are there any questions of staff on this? Would any member of the public like to comment on this? See none, let's bring it back, and I will entertain a motion to approve the response, allowing for some minor edits.
So moved.
Second.
Councilmember Andrews?
Yes.
Councilmember Bailey?
Yes.
Councilmember Ravazio?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Condon?
Yes.
Mayor First?
Yes. Thank you all, appreciate that. All right, let's move on to business item 7.1. Consideration and possible action to approve a professional services agreement with Tyler Technologies for implementation, maintenance, and ongoing support of the Encode Enterprise Resource Planning System, and authorize the town manager to sign the agreement. Todd.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. A slight change in the direction tonight. As the mayor stated, I would request consideration for direction on this $98,000 expenditure. In talking with the town attorney, and I'm sorry, the contract was not part of this packet. It was delayed. We just received it recently, and so the town attorney is reviewing that. I have copies if you would like to have them for this meeting, but if it's okay with you, I'd like to just bring it back, possibly for the consent calendar at our next meeting, after the town attorney gets a full look at the contract. But tonight, I would request direction for approval of this expenditure. I do want to clarify a statement I made to the council at the last meeting. This is not a budget appropriation request. This is something actually that was in the budget, and I'd like to clarify that. For fiscal year 17-18, I thought Daria Carrillo, our finance director, did a good job in providing background and discussion for the council. As part of the evaluation of our financial system last year, we had our expert consultants recommend approximately $98,000 in expenditures for additional financial modules to support our system that was purchased back in 2002, 2003. So that was in our current budget. What I asked Dari to do was to research, was to evaluate our current financial platform as we've discussed in the past, and also do a full review of what financial platforms are out there, what types of financial platforms are being used by her cohorts within the county as a resource, and to give a full report and analysis. She covers that in this report. She is recommending that we purchase a Tyler product. Our Eden system is part of the Tyler Technologies network, and it's called Encode 10. Encode 10 is the same system that the city of Larkspur uses, as well as the town of San Anselmo. The town of Tiburon is also going to this platform. That's helpful because Daria then has with amongst her cohorts a group to network and discuss best practices and the best use of the system. The other thing that I want to point out, and I'm going to explain it a little bit differently on page 2 of the fiscal impact. So we have $98,000 budgeted in this current fiscal year. This request before you is basically we're requesting $54,000 of a one-time payment. And so you'll see a savings, if I'm looking at that right, let me make sure, I'm sorry you guys. Yeah, so in the current town, so currently we were going to purchase $65,000 in one-time costs for these modulars to support, and really I call it patchwork to our system, and an additional $33,000 in processing equipment for a total of $98,000. That's in our current budget. What we're recommending is that we do a one-time cost of $54,000, and that's for the new Encode 10 system. We'll see a savings of approximately $43,000 by doing this. Currently, we pay $46,000 of ongoing costs. That's software support for our current system. When we make this change, we'll no longer be responsible for $46,000 of ongoing cost. That estimate will now be $8,000 because we want to keep access to our current system because it has all of our historical data going back to at least 2002. So that'll be a cost ongoing of $8,000. Moving forward now, instead of $46,000 of maintenance cost, it'll be $40,000. So overall, we are going to see a savings of approximately $43,000 by this recommendation, and it'll provide the full platform for us financially to do short-term, long-term financing. This is one-stop shopping for us. We won't be coming back to you for additional purchases within our financial platform. This system also speaks to the OpenGov system, and we have not been able to go to OpenGov yet because our current system doesn't speak to OpenGov, and so I think this is also a necessary step. We pay approximately $8,500 for OpenGov. So if this is approved and the contract is ultimately assigned and approved at the next council meeting, we will be able to get this up and running in the next 3 months. And so I think it's really important moving forward for staff and for Daria. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
I had one quick question. If we go forward with this, when do you think we'll get OpenGov fully implemented and operational?
2 to 3 months.
Great,
Yes.
thanks. Carla?
Yeah. Does the 40,896, does that include updates?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
Thank you. Great question. Yes.
Sloan?
Absolutely.
Over here? Jim?
I'm in favor of it, but since we'll be using the cloud, you will then be dependent on the internet. I believe you only have one pipe coming into the building. It's Comcast. Are you going to have to find an alternative vendor so you have redundancy?
So it's a virtual network, so we're not committed to our portal that comes into the building. We've had Michael Dang, our IT expert, look at this system. We will have access to the cloud. We're not concerned about something happening to a specific portal and not being able to access it. It just hasn't happened yet since the system's been up, and it's been recommended amongst our IT department. It's something else that we can also access at home. And so we can, if we're having a conversation, we'll have access to it wherever we are. there's also a backup within our server system, and so there'll be backups, kind of like your iPhone or your software, where it'll back our system up on a daily basis. So if something catastrophic did happen, we would have a 12-hour backup to our system going backwards. And so there's redundancies built into the system, but it's something that we've absolutely evaluated with other city and town governments that have used this for the past 5 years, as well as our IT department, to ensure that that would not be an issue. And we're told that we've heard what we need to be comfortable with that recommendation.
Okay.
And I'd be happy to sit down moving forward, and we will as the Finance Committee, to give you a basic overview again of that so you feel comfortable with it. That's a good point.
Okay, any other questions? No? We'll open it up to the public. Would any member of the public like to speak to this? Seeing none, bring it back. So at this point, you are just asking for us in general to give our the straw poll kind of, yes, you're going in the right direction. You will bring it back on consent?
On consent at the next meeting, and so
Okay.
that's what I'm looking for.
All right.
Yes. Thank you.
I think it looks great. I think you're heading in the right direction. I appreciate that. Anybody
Very
else?
much agree. And by the way, I suspect our compliments not only to you, Todd, for this looks like it's like really good, but also to Dario.
I'll pass it on. It was all her, so thank you.
Okay. Carla?
Yes.
Jim?
I echo everything these folks said. Yes,
All right.
absolutely.
Bring it back on consent. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, moving on to 7.2, discussion and possible direction to staff regarding lease agreements at Park Madera Center.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. This seems like an appropriate time to discuss this. Michael Gralnick, who spoke at open time at the last meeting, and I believe he's here today and can add anything during the open comment period to this, but has put in a request to the town manager and council to consider having a discussion and providing direction to the town manager on current and future lease agreements to provide some stability for those leasing and at the shopping center, to give them some direction of the future of what we're thinking as a town. And so I wanted to provide a little bit of fiscal impact. Again, it was in our budget. This is the first year that we are actually in the positive of money that we receive and money going out for the shopping center. We also provide just some basic information of the offset in expenditures since the purchase of 2006. With the help of Councilman Andrews, we provided some additional data, and they're in attachments 1 through 4 for you, but there's a Park Madera rent roll worksheet. That's attachment 2. There's a summary of the Park Madera Center bonds to give you an idea of the number of bonds and when they come to pass. I'll use that word. And also a prepayment procedure for those bonds, so what that would look like. And it just gives council an idea of our debt payments and when they come up. And something else that we've also added at the bottom of page 1 and 2, it's our current lease and the expiration dates for all of the leases within our shopping center. The one that I want to point out, because it's probably the most important, is Boyette Petroleum. That's the gas station. The lease is actually up in 2021, but they have the option to extend to 2031. And so in looking at that, and it's something I haven't discussed with the town attorney yet, and Vesa, who is our negotiator for Keegan and Copen, is to look at that as 2021 approaches and to see what our options are to have discussion with the gas station. But again, for right now, I would say we should assume that the longest standing lease is 2031, if that helps council with any considerations. And so I think, and again, the letter for Michael Gralnick, the owner of Wash Tub Laundromat in Corte Madera, is attachment 1. I think it's good timing as you look at, as these leases come up over the next couple of years. It would be helpful to give staff some direction of how we should negotiate those. How far out are you willing to consider on some of these leases moving forward? And I think a broader picture, not necessarily for tonight, but if it is an interest of the council, for staff to put together a report to come back to you of maybe a longer-term strategy, if you would like to discuss that at some point this year or in the future, of some things that you would like staff to consider, and maybe start a public conversation of long-term strategies for the shopping center. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Questions? Sloan?
No, I do want to discuss after we do public comment, though.
Okay. Carla, any questions?
Not at this point.
Thank you. Yes, Jim?
A question about the gas station. Under the terms of the lease, who's responsible for decommissioning the gas tank? Or don't we know?
I think that's a bigger picture conversation, yeah.
Okay.
We have some work to do on that.
Bob?
No.
All right. I actually thought it was a good staff report, so thank you for all the information. Let's open it up for public comment, and then we'll bring it back for council discussion. So I think there's at least one member of the public who would like to speak. Just a reminder, state your name, 3 minutes, and where you live, 3 minutes.
Michael Grelnick. I live in San Rafael, but proud business owner here in Corte Madera. I think I kind of already covered it in 2 weeks ago, but I want to add something, which is just to acknowledge the 4 of you and the 5th person that was there when you did the meeting a few months ago discussing the refi, I guess it is, of the bonds. You guys entered a fantastic discussion that I enjoyed listening to about the long-term vision, the options, the notion that this is a building you bought to have a park that's in the public interest of a community center. That said, the reality of adding new bonds and what's involved with actual redevelopment of the center is going to take a while. So I encourage you, even if you're drawn to get into a discussion about the long-term vision, please continue that from a few months ago. Just consider when you extend leases the length of time it would take until ground is actually broken, as distinct from when you start the process, because longer term would be better for all of us in the community that we serve.
Thank you very much. Is there any other member of the public who would like to speak to this? All right, see none, we'll close public comment and bring it back for discussion. Sloan?
So, yeah, no, by the way, as usual, good thorough report. Todd, I'm in favor of what's being recommended on a case-by-case basis. The discussion I wanted to have, and I don't know how to direct this, I don't understand how involved are we at the staff level in negotiating leases and so forth. In other words, I know we have a negotiator. Do we have like a commercial property manager? I don't know. Let me tell you where I'm going with this. I've never. I think we're not all in disagreement with this. In general, it's a dicey thing for a public entity to be a landlord, and don't know how to get it done properly. I'd be curious, Bob, you in particular, because you kind of know the situation. If you have suggestions how it ought to work, but can you give me, Todd, a thumbnail like how does it work? Like,
Yeah, so Keegan and Copen, we pay 5% of revenue.
and they're like
Goes-
a commercial property
It's a
manager?
commercial property owner, so they handle day-to-day. If there's a problem with a facility there, it goes through them. They coordinate with us to approve the expenditure, but they're the first line. They handle day-to-day operations. When it comes to negotiations, so even the structure of our, and I think it's something Michael has brought up in the past, our actual contract forms are through Keegan and Copen, so VESA does that. So she'll give us a market analysis, she negotiates, she works directly with the town manager and the finance director, who then would coordinate with the council. And so, and that's how it goes.
Okay.
And now is it the perfect scenario? That's all I know at this point in my limited exposure in the last 10 months.
Can I just add
Yeah.
a little history? So Keegan and Copen was added, I want to say about 5 or 6 years ago, because we didn't have a manager. And I think it showed in the way the leases were negotiated.
Yes.
And, you know, we recommended that they brought in someone who does this for a living, right? This is what they do. They manage, businesses like this. And I think you can see historically what's happened in the last 5 years is revenues increased, the place is better taken care of. And, in general, I think it was a really good move to have it professionally managed and negotiated with all the leases.
Okay, thank you. That was what I just wanted to understand, because I remember sitting here and listening to occasionally David or George talk about these things and wondering whether, and then, it's good. I'm glad we have a pro handling it.
So
Okay.
am I.
Okay. Anything else?
Discussion in general, you mean, or?
Yeah.
Sure, I'll say a few things.
Okay.
I missed the discussion on the bonds, so I don't know what exactly, so I don't have any history on that. But what I would love to see us have do, I mean, for whatever reason it was bought, and owned, we own it now, right? And as Sloan said, should we be in the business of running a business like this? Probably not. If you look around, most governments are not in that business because it's not what we do and do well. But we do own it, and it's a really good piece of real estate. It has increased in value, I think, pretty dramatically. I think there's an opportunity to take a look at it from the town's perspective and say, what can we do with this long term? There's a lot of ideas out there, and I would envision some kind of process, maybe not unlike what was done on Tamil Vista in that corridor, where there's a lot of public input, working closely with the planning department, and we create a vision, and say, what are we really going to do with this thing long term? Because what we really lack, and the reason we're having this discussion, is we don't have a vision. And it's really hard to give somebody direction on what to do with leases if we don't know what this thing is going to be in 2 years and 5 years. So I would say this is an opportunity, and what I would recommend, I'd love to see happen, is have this maybe sent back to planning and have them come back to us or the town manager, whomever you see fit, and say, here's a process or here's some ideas that you might use going forward to develop a plan for this. So having said that, and having seen this thing kind of operate in the past, that's going to take a while, right? I mean, it's going to take some time to figure out how it's going to work. It's going to take time to set it up. It's going to take time to get public input. It's going to take time to implement. So from backing up from that, from a real estate perspective, what I would recommend then is I would probably say start giving people 5-year leases right now, because it's going to take 4 or 5 years for us to do anything. Plus, we got the bond financing on top of this. And maybe, because it's important, I know, for businesses to have a long-term perspective, right? In 5 years, if you're trying to invest money in a business, isn't necessarily long-term. But we don't know where we're going. So maybe you there's a way to structure the deal so that you have a 5-year option to renew, and maybe they get the extra 5 years at a certain guaranteed rate of increase, but the town has the option to kill the deal and step in and take it out after 5 years if that's what kind of thing happens. So there's a way to do that. Vesa Beckham and I think the people at Keegan and Copen are better qualified to do that, but I think there's ways to structure it and a way to do it that I think serve both ends, which to me would be getting public input and consensus on what we do with this property long term. But secondly, also making sure that we manage it properly for the businesses and we keep the income stream going, because that's critical on this thing too. We want to make sure that the tenants have the belief that, they can have some kind of, foresight as to where they're going to be in 5 years.
Thank you. Well, I actually just want to say one thing. Bob, I agree with almost everything you said. You had mentioned maybe kicking it to Planning Commission.
No, I meant the planning department.
Planning Department,
As
okay.
as a recommendation to come back and say, how do we structure this? And then I said, maybe to the town manager, and he
Okay.
decides how to do it, but some kind of process.
All right, but what would you think about maybe in terms of coming up with a concept of what we might want to see there? Maybe creating an ad hoc committee with a couple of council members, 1 or 2 staff members, maybe,
That might be a way to do it, but I think what's important is that whatever we do, we really get the public's input on this thing.
No, I agree.
Because there's a million different ways you can go, and I think more importantly, I think we have some really great resources in the town. We have some really good minds,
Right.
from people who know things about housing, who know about real estate development, who know about business, who know about parks, who have the whole spectrum of what we may need, and I think it's critical that we look at that and try to get a consensus as to where we are going
Right.
forward on this. But-
Okay.
And whatever that process is.
got it. Carla?
Okay, I didn't realize that we would be talking, we probably aren't, about long-term vision for the Park Madera Center. There is something that a group of us have been working on that would utilize part of the Park Madera Center. It wouldn't touch Mr. Grolnick's property or his immediate neighbors at all, but it would, I think, serve the community well, and it would be ideally located right by Town Park. And so I don't know if we are discussing this now or whether this is part of the ad hoc group that would come back with discussions of visions. I don't want to, jump into something if it's premature, but certainly something that I would like to share with the council at the appropriate time.
Absolutely. I think we're just trying to figure out how we might start to begin the discussion. So I think we're not at actually discussing potential uses.
Good, okay, because then we'll also turn back the clock to when it was first purchased, and the original intent was that it would allocate land for the use of the town. And so this does kind of correlate with the original plan. So if we can agendize that at some point, or I'm happy to serve on the ad hoc committee for that.
If we even want to go with an ad hoc,
right.
I'm not sure. Well, let's finish up our comments, and then I might ask Todd to kind of consider what staff might be able to think up. Sloan, anything? Jim?
I guess the longest lease is 2031, assuming the gas station renews. The bond maturity is 2037. We can start doing bond prepayments, assuming we have the cash available to do that, in 2026. It's currently 2017. I think we should kick this off to some future council in 4 years and let them make the determination on what they want to use the property for. We don't have to address that. All we have to do is sort of give guidance in terms of how long we want the leases that we're currently negotiating or about to negotiate, what sort of termination date we'd be interested in, so.
Okay, well, I think, I'm guessing, Todd, do you want actual direction as to how long we are wanting to enter into committed leases, and then maybe, like Bob said, suggesting an option that gives the town the ability to, cancel and retain the property if we're moving forward maybe more aggressively in terms of time frame than we might otherwise think.
I think, can I say one thing before you answer that?
Sure.
I think what we've been asked to do is to direct whether we agree, that staff can be directed on a property-by-property basis to negotiate whatever they think is appropriate, and then B, in those negotiations, do we have commentary that they should be mindful of? And I've heard at least two, which is Bob thinking 4 to 5 years plus an option 4 to 5, and Jim's thinking roughly 9 or 10 years, right, Jim?
Yeah, basically,
So those don't
can't do
seem.
anything until
Well, I'm looking for
2026 if we wanted to pay off the bonds.
Yeah, and so those two don't seem inconsistent to me.
Right,
But maybe Carla's going in a different way.
Yeah, for a portion of it, I would like to take a much more aggressive position.
Okay, so I leave that to you, Diane.
Okay. First of all, so, yeah, if we look at.
Is that right, Todd? Did I get that right?
Yeah, so you want the authority to, I'm sorry, I'm looking at,
So what would be helpful, and that's exactly it. I think that speaks to what Vice Mayor Condon is bringing up. I think when I look at these leases really over the next couple of years, between 2017, 2018, and 2019, specifically the next couple of years, there's a number of leases that are up, and it would be helpful to have the direction, and that's helpful of a strategy with those leases to say, hey, we're comfortable with a 5-year, and would you consider, because I think it's helpful for some of these owners, business owners, because they're doing financing, and to have that additional 5-year option under certain terms that protect the town is helpful for them for their financing. And it's specific, I think, for Michael tonight. Right. And so to know that you're comfortable with that, again, this will always come back to council for approval. But to have that direction to be able to negotiate that and help some of our tenants, that's what I'm looking for, and that would be helpful to have that direction. The other part to Vice Mayor Condon's point is, I think the area of that shopping center that you may be focused on, again, that lease isn't up until 2020, and so we have time, if that's the direction of the council, of the more immediate leases, 2017, 2018, 2019, and to give me that direction. Hey, we're comfortable with you looking at these series of leases and these patches, and we want to continue to have a conversation as we go. If we go that way longer term, we can continue the discussion. I'm focused more on the first three sets of the lease agreements. Again, I haven't had any of the other businesses ask me past 2020 for that extension. And so until we get there, I think we have time. But I know the first three patches, they have specifically asked for something similar to what Councilmember Ravazio mentioned, having a
Okay.
5-year
Yeah.
with an option. That's all. I hope I answered that.
Okay, so I'm going to suggest we kind of take maybe a straw poll on how we stand on two things. Number one, authorizing Todd to negotiate new leases on a case-by-case basis. And number two, because there is apparently some level of support for Bob's recommendation, that we kind of give as direction something approximating 5-year lease with a 5-year option, but allowing the town to be able to cancel the option if the town wants to retain the property. So, on the first item, negotiating new leases on a case-by-case basis. Everybody good with that?
Yes.
Okay. On the second one, adopting what Bob laid out, 5-year option. The town has the ability to cancel that, which would give us an approximate, well, that's 10 years, but that's pretty close to what you had suggested, Jim, by 9 years.
Yeah, I guess my only hesitation with it, with the last thing, is locking us into the structure of 5 years with 5 years. Could be a tenant would just want, a 10-year lease with 1 year options, if you're,
You mean like 5 plus?
5
Single
plus
year
5
options?
1-year extensions.
Yeah, I
you know.
think we can leave that to Todd to negotiate on a
Right,
case-by-case basis.
But I don't want to, the way I heard your motion, it was sort of like 5 and 5 as opposed
As
to.
general direction,
Okay.
not,
The principle is 5 years, lock it in, and then there's options on the
Up
other
to.
side of that, however it works for
Not
the
out
tenant
more
and the
than 10,
town.
yeah.
Right,
Right.
not more
Up to.
than 5 years, however it
Right.
works for both sides. And
Right.
and
And this
Keegan and
is-
Copen, that's what they do for a living.
Yeah.
They can figure out how
Yeah.
to do that.
And in 5 years, who knows what the
All right.
council will think, what the
Who
town will
knows?
think.
okay.
Agreed in all respects.
Agreed? Carla?
Yes.
Bob?
Yes.
Jim?
Agreed?
I
Thank you.
got it?
Thank
Does
you.
that give you what you need?
Very helpful, thank you.
What? We
Could you just say it real,
Really quickly, he's saying, you're saying 5 plus 5 on leases, and 5 plus whatever on leases that end in 2017.
why don't you, yeah, I'll reopen public comment.
I just want to make sure the town manager is clear, because you're talking about 5 plus options on leases that are open to renegotiation between 2017 and 2019. So you're saying 5 and whatever from today's date, or 5 and whatever from when the lease expires? Is that a clear question?
I think approximately, thank you, that's actually a really good question. Any other member of the public like to speak? Seeing none, I'll close public comment. We're talking approximately 9 to 10 years from today's date, correct?
Well,
And I would say yes for now, and if something's coming up and you need a little more direction from council, you can always bring it back and we can reconsider if there
Can I-
are some issues.
Yeah,
Yes.
Can I just, I would say, yeah, I would agree with that, because if we allow 5 years, and perhaps we decide to start some kind of longer-term planning process, and perhaps there's an answer from that in 2 years, and now it's 2019, that may guide, right, what we decide to do in 2019 or 2020 with an additional 5 years. So there will possibly be additional information which will guide the town manager's decision on how to do this.
Okay.
so if we
Everybody
do,
okay?
if we do 10 years from today, that would get us out to the bond maturity date, which is 2037.
27.
But what,
20.
27, thank you.
does this apply to the 2017-2018 lease expirations, the 5 years from today, or
I think so, yeah. I think that's what we're talking about.
or all of them?
I think what I would maybe recommend would be, as you, again, I'm focused on the 17, 18, and 19 leases. Within what I'm hearing, if we just had the flexibility to consider up to the 5-year option for those 3, when those leases potentially come up, it still seems it's within that format, because it always allows us the option within the option. If we come up with something and we want to do it, it allows us flexibility. Again, this is to assist those business owners within our business model as well, to extend when their leases are coming up in 17, 18, and 19 specifically. So those are the ones that I'm focused on. And so that would be helpful. Again, we'll consider everything and look at it as we go and report back to the council, but if I could have that leeway for consideration would be helpful. Thank you.
Okay, but I think you have the leeway, right? Is that your
I think I hear it.
understanding?
I think I
Okay.
hear it.
Everybody good?
Thank you.
All right?
Okay.
Okay. Thank you for coming in. Moving on to agenda item 7.3. First, reading and possible action to introduce an ordinance to amend section 2.06.020, qualifications of chapter 2.06, boards and commissions of the Corte Madera Municipal Code, and section 2.14.010, created membership of chapter 2.14, flood control board.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. I'd like to thank the town attorney for helping with this staff report. Hopefully it flows okay and you can follow it. Again, during our recent interview process for the Flood Control Board, it was discovered that a current board member may be in conflict with the qualifications set forth by the Corte Madera Municipal Code. And at the direction of the town attorney, after reviewing our ordinances, is recommending that council review the potential conflict and take appropriate action. And really the crux of the issue is with, it's on page 2, it's actually the second section, it's the membership section of the Flood Control Board. And within there, I bolded it for you. It's board members shall have real property interest in areas of the town which are subject to flooding to assure that property owners in flood areas are adequately represented on the board. We currently have a board member that lives outside this definition. We went back and did a little bit of history of the code revisions. Again, in 1989, we revised the Flood Control Board, or actually in 1986, we revised the Flood Control Board and made the Flood Control Committee. In March 21 of 2000, we made some further amendments, and again, we made further amendments in 2002. Those 2 amendments had to do with, we had issues. The Flood Control Board shall be 7 board members. We had difficulty finding 7 board members, so they changed the language to up to 7 board members. There was some specific language, a conversation in the 2000 meeting, and it's on the top of page 3, to this point. They made a revision when they talked about board members, and the word shall be in the floodplain or in the flood control area. And Harry Schriedman actually asked if members could live on Christmas Tree Hill, to the very issue that we're talking about. And the assistant town manager at the time stated yes. And again, there's a summary of the 2002 amendment. They changed some of the rules because then, again, to allow board members to stay on the board to discuss matters that directly impacted them. And so they had to pass a resolution to allow that. So that's a summary. And looking at it, trying to understand what the intent was to have that wording, it really appears like it may have been an error at one of these points when we amended this ordinance. In looking at it, I think we currently enjoy strong membership. We have a breadth of experience and passion on the board. I think it's important to have board members in the flood area that are directly impacted, but I could argue that every resident is impacted by that. Mm-hmm. And to allow a full breadth of expertise like we have, it's something that is in the scope of the council whenever we do interviews to look at the layout of the board or commission. I think you do that as it is now. Again, the scope of this board is advisory to expenditures of the flood tax monies. Every owner, property owner in Corte Madera pays into that property, pays that tax. And so that's an important point as well. And so we wanted to bring this to your attention. I'm sorry that I don't have the red line version. As we started to go through this, it became very complicated to understand the changes that we're making. And so those changes are spelled out in the staff report. And again, attachment 1 also lists the draft amendments to the 2 sections. We're also recommending that we continue to have you have the potential to have one board member or commissioner who is not a resident, who is not within the flood area, who is a business owner. And I think that's, right, currently we don't have someone on the board, but it allows that flexibility. And so with our recommended changes, it allows the council full discretion and allows a full breadth of expertise that we enjoy today for the flood board. One point that I also want to point out, and thank Councilman Ravazio for pointing it out. Section 2.06.020, qualifications of boards and commissions. We actually, at the bottom of it, as you may recall, we passed an ordinance back in April adding the Accessibility Advisory Committee to the BPAC. And if you look, there's a reference in the last couple of lines that up to 2 seats on the Accessibility Advisory Commission may be filled by a person who works at least 20 hours per week within the town, but is not an elector of the town. We would recommend that if you pass or consider passing ordinance number 968, that we strike that language referencing the Accessibility Committee. Again, that's something we should have done back in May when we made that change, adding them to the BPAC. So I wanted to point that out as well. I apologize for that. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, I have a question. On, in the ordinance, section 2, which is an amendment to the Flood Control Board, I see that you changed the word "shall have a real property interest" to "may require," but I don't see anything related to what was in the staff report that was under recommendations that the council, that really outlines that the council may consider other factors such as expertise, location of residence, not necessarily ownership, and the flood tax related item, which is the 3rd bullet point. So is there a reason those were actually not added to that section?
The intent of staff was to keep the ordinance as flexible as possible in general in nature. That was our intent. It's something we can certainly add. Those were points of consideration that I wanted just in the research of the ordinance going back a decade or so, that I just wanted to bring to the attention of the council. But again, I think those are factors for you to consider, and we could certainly, through the town attorney, consider those.
You retain the discretion to consider those types of factors in all of your appointments. And so there's really no necessity that you list them out here. And I think what the town manager was trying to do was to let you know there are lots of factors that you might consider. The change that we've made gives you the discretion to consider or not flood zone location when you're making this appointment. And so you can, if you want, as a council and you're making an appointment, think about the current composition of your flood control board and commission, and determine that perhaps you might want a vacant seat to be represented by someone who either does or does not have a property interest in a flood zone. So that's something that you could impose. You can impose that requirement as you're making the appointment, but you don't have to. And so what we wanted to avoid is by just eliminating the language altogether, any implication that you cannot consider that.
Okay. So you recommend we keep this as is by keeping the may, the council may require.
You may require, but you're not required to require.
Right, and not necessarily going out of the way to add the other 2 bullet points that were in the staff report.
That's correct. That's
Okay.
correct.
Okay, thank you. Carla?
Okay, I had a couple of comments on this, and I'm just going to,
Well, this is question time, right?
Questions?
Yeah.
Yeah, we haven't, we'll discuss after we have public comment.
Okay,
Do you
it's
have
a-
any staff questions?
It's well, it is, but I'll wait. I'll wait.
You want to wait?
Mhm.
Okay. Sloan, any questions? Jim?
Looking at the phrase where it says, "One seat on the flood control board may be filled by a person who is not an elector of the town, but who is a representative of local businesses." What happens if we have somebody living in town, doesn't have a business here, but he's a world-class engineer, but he's here on a permanent residency visa? Would he be excluded?
Well, that was
If he's a
basically
resident,
my
he was a
question.
resident of the town, you don't have to be
He
not a
can't,
voter.
he
You
can't vote
have
in
to be,
elections.
I think your general rule requires that you.
Have a real property interest.
then I
So real property just means land and improvements on it, and
Right.
interest in that can be temporal in nature. So a leasehold or renter's interest is fine.
okay.
But I'm talking about
What?
a non-US citizen
Okay,
who can't
hold on,
vote.
hold on. Can we let Teresa answer that?
Your, under your ordinance, putting aside the the representative who is a business representative, let's put that aside for a moment. All of the other members of your boards of commissions have to be an elector of the town, which would not allow the person who is here on a temporary basis, but who is not a voter or a registered to vote. You would need to have, be registered to vote here. With the exceptions listed, you have a few exceptions to that rule listed. And one of those exceptions is that you can have you may, but you're not required to appoint one person on the flood control board who represents local businesses, even if they don't live here and therefore are not an elector.
Okay.
I do then have a
Yes,
question.
Carla?
All right, what happens when you're talking about this particular language here? And let's take, for example, sorry to pick on him, but since he's not here, I'll pick on Dave Bracken. And what happens if Dave Bracken moves to Corte Madera, wants to be on the flood control board? This is really his expertise, and he can't join because he might have chosen to live over on Chapman or Oakdale or up on Christmas Tree Hill. How does that play into that?
So all of the places that you've listed, and you'll have to forgive me, I am new to the town and I don't know all of the areas.
Okay,
But
those
you're
are not
saying-
flood.
Okay, so what this amendment allows is, right now, the way your ordinance is drafted as a result of what appears to be an unintended consequence of a cleanup amendment, is that everyone on the board has to have a real property interest in a flood zone. And this change that staff has recommended would eliminate that requirement, and it would be entirely within the discretion of the council to decide whether to impose that requirement or not when making an appointment.
Okay, then I guess what it is that I didn't understand where it says created, the 2.14.010 created membership flood control. And it says here, board members shall have real property interest in areas of town which are subject to flooding to assure that property owners in the flood areas are adequately represented on the board.
That's how your current code reads.
Okay, and so then we're proposing then that it's a may.
May.
Okay,
But,
You always had to be an elector to be on any board or commission.
right, we're
Always.
still
We're not-
requiring
Yeah,
every member to be an elector, with the exception,
of one.
with the exceptions listed under Section 1 amendment of the ordinance, which is a local business representative on the flood board, and a seat on the Parks and Rec for somebody under the age of 18, and an unlimited number of seats of any youth advisory board may be filled by residents of the town under the age of 18.
This may be
That's it.
helpful. The amendment to a section 2.06.020 that deals with the flood board is not substantive. It's just a clarification. There was some awkward language, and this makes it clearer. The language is clearer. So while we were here cleaning up flood control board regulations, we cleaned this one up too. Now, your town manager has now made an additional recommendation that you eliminate the last phrase that pertains to the Accessibility Advisory Commission, given an amendment that occurred in April. And so that is certainly substantive because you're taking it out. But the one that was listed in the staff report on that section doesn't change it substantively at all. What the substantive change is in, the staff is recommending in section 2.14.010, effectively changing the word shall to may, to restore this back to what appears to have been the original intent, which is that council would have discretion about whether to impose a flood control zone property requirement on any board member.
Thank you. Assuming, of course, or besides the fact that you're recommending that we strike the clause about the Accessibility Advisory Commission, what other changes did you make in that section? Section 1 amendment on section 2.06.020?
So if you look on page 2 of your staff report, at the very top where it says relevant code provisions, those two provisions are the code as it now reads. And the section that is highlighted is the language that is currently there. And it reads, "One seat on the flood control board may be filled by a representative of local businesses who need not be an elector of the town." And the proposed revision is,
This attachment 1.
Right. And I see it, one seat on the flood control board may be filled by a person who is not an elector of the town, but who is a representative of local businesses. So you just simply change that wording to make it more clear?
Yes.
yes.
Okay, and
to
that
make-
was the only change in this paragraph, right?
Aside from,
Aside from the recommendation that we strike the part about the Accessibility Advisory Commission?
that's correct.
Okay, got it.
And I apologize for the red line version, but again, we made
That's
a
all right.
lot of,
Okay.
so I apologize for that confusion.
Thank you.
And I want to double check that on the Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory Committee, there can be two representatives who are knowledgeable about accessibility. And is there any limitation that those two people have to live in town? Or do we need to look at that as well?
I don't think it's before us.
As I understand it, this section applies to all of your boards and commissions.
Right.
And so all members of boards and commissions must be electors of the town, except as listed in this provision.
Correct.
So that would mean that you members of your bicycle pedestrian, it's just a city entity, Mr. Town Manager. It's not a joint entity with another agency. So all of the members would need to be electors of the town.
Okay, any other questions?
We're going to come back for discussion on this.
Yeah. All right, so I'll open it up for public comment.
Bob Bundy, 89 Golden Hind Passage. Speaking as a citizen and somebody who has observed the flood board, I think the changes that Todd has outlined for everybody are good, and I really wasn't aware that we were being restrictive. In looking at the flood board over the years, I don't know that there's actually been a business owner that has participated in this. And what I've observed is that some residents living in the flood zone get very concerned about flooding get on the flood board, but are very parochial and, don't see the big picture and don't look at everything else. And the residents that have lived outside of the flood zone have had an interest, have had particular expertise, engineering, hydrology, really a very good understanding of the engineering dynamics involved in it, and have been great additions to the flood board. So I commend cleaning up the language in relationship to that. There seems to be a very strong flood board at this point.
Thank you. Is there any other member of the public who would like to speak? See none, we'll bring it back for discussion. Carla?
Okay. In the third whereas for the ordinance, and I think this really,
Which whereas?
the 853.
That was the one that was,
That's the original one, I think.
that was the original one that was adopted in 2000.
Okay, so I think that it's really important that we don't support the language in there where I think a lot of it was extraneous that, and kind of goes along with what Bob Bundy just said, that just because somebody lives in the flood zone doesn't mean that they might be the best person, nor might they be the best qualified. And so I think that to make sure that we don't go into all the language that was done in the ordinance 853, the third whereas, that pretty much focuses on that this is going to assure people living in the flood zone that they get the best representation merely because somebody else lives in a flood zone. So I think it's really helpful to get rid of that, or any type of inference that might be drawn from that.
Thank you. Sloan?
I agree entirely with the proposed changes.
Thank you. Over here.
I agree with the proposed changes.
Jim?
I agree with the proposed changes, subject to the amendment of doing away with and up to 2 seats on the accessory advisory commission.
All right. I would support the recommended changes, but again, I want to make perfectly clear, we are talking about the language that is included in Attachment 1, the draft ordinance amendment number 968, striking the following clause listed under the paragraph titled Section 1 Amendment of Section 2.06.020. And that clause that will be struck is towards the end, and it is, and up to 2 seats on the Accessibility Advisory Commission may be filled by a person who works at least 20 hours per week within the town, but is not an elector of the town, period.
And plus, we'd have to add an "and" between businesses and 1 seat.
Thank you. Kind of in the middle of the paragraph, right before 1 seat. Add
Yes,
the word "and," thank you.
placing the semicolon.
Did you want to add something?
I actually was going to make the same comment about the and.
Oh, wow, good proofreading, guys. Are you-
No, so moved.
Second.
Councilmember Andrews?
Yes.
Councilmember Bailey?
Yes.
Councilmember Ravazio?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Condon?
Yes.
Mayor First?
Yes.
Dan, can I make a question before you
Yes.
move on? Can I ask, can somebody, and probably the town attorney with Todd, with your permission, can you send me information about what do you have to do to be an elector? I mean, this is a U.S. constitutional issue? Is it state constitutional? Is it like a town thing? I mean, it strikes me as almost civil rights in nature. I've never considered this issue before. Would you mind just forwarding me basic reference material, because I'm ignorant of what the concerns there are for example, that, Jim, I misunderstood your question before when I responded to it too hastily, but just out of curiosity, and there's probably an excellent public policy reason why, but if we have a long-term resident in our town who may own property in our town but doesn't happen to be a citizen here, that person is disqualified if they're not entitled to vote in our town, right?
Certainly, you could make a change. You could.
I'm
make
not saying,
a change to
maybe
this.
there's some reason, I don't know, but I think, I don't want to, there's no red herring, so I apologize, I'll close my mouth in 1 minute here. There may be a civil rights reason why it has to be a certain way, I don't know. That's why if you could just send me some definition of elector or what I'll read it myself, but if you could save me the effort of trying to figure out how to get to it, I'd appreciate it.
Some of this is a policy call. I'm happy to send you a definition, but the definition is going to mean that you're registered to vote, which is not those qualifications. The town council doesn't have control over what one can, how to define elector or not. What you do have control over, however, is if you don't want to impose that requirement. Many councils like to have residents, and part of the concern is to make sure someone is truly a resident and not perhaps just a weekend dweller, and residing elsewhere, perhaps if this is a weekend home or a vacation home, and they really perhaps have two residences, that they really need to pick a home, and it needs to be their primary residence. But you could certainly there would be some leeway to change the language so that you capture that by looking more at primary residence than whether they're registered to vote, and then that could take care of that as well.
Well, I'm more worried about what happens if you have, a first-rate engineer or hydrologist or, let's say a Hollander, moves here, marries an American girl, so he's a long-term resident, he's got a green card, he knows everything about dikes, okay? And he wants to join the flood board. We couldn't let him on even though he has a tremendous skill set.
Certainly, this is perhaps what we might do is look at what some options are, and then bring this back to you again. We wouldn't be bringing section 2.14.010, which deals just with the flood control board, but bring back the ordinance that addresses your boards and commissions more generally, to give you some options that may address that issue, but also address the other side of, someone who really is here perhaps just on a very short-term basis, this isn't their primary residence, to rule out those folks so that you have sort of committed citizens of Corte Madera, even if they can't vote.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. So again, this was first reading, and introduction of this ordinance. It will come back for a second vote to actually adopt it. I think consent calendar is probably fine.
Thank you.
Okay. You have it on, sent on the draft. Perfect. Okay, thank you. Moving on. Agenda item 7.4, discussion and possible direction to staff regarding updating of the town council rules and procedures for town council meetings and consideration of a town council retreat for goal and priority setting.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. A few action items here, but really in an effort to support the town council with its duties in conducting town business, Mayor first directed staff to research possible areas for improvement to evaluate the town council's rules and procedures. Those rules and procedures were last updated in 2003. The staff report is set up in really 4 categories for conversation. The first are possible changes to the existing Corte Madera Town Council rules and procedures. The second area is proposals for potential new rules and procedures. The third one is staff improvements and training. I think that's where we look internally of how staff can do a better job of presenting items to the council. And the item 4 is to consider holding a town retreat, and we can discuss that at the end. And so we can approach this any way you would like to, Madam Mayor. What I was contemplating doing, if it's okay with you, was to start with the first one and really Attached is the council's rules and procedures, but the items outlined here are comments that I have heard individually over time from council members, from staff, from community members, of areas of maybe we may want to consider looking at. You'll see the section in section 1 of that, what I'm talking about. It's a definition of what the section is, and you'll see a comment. That comment is either a comment from a council member, a community member, or an outside member of the town. You'll all see in some of the areas there is a recommendation that the town manager provides. And with that, again, I would just like to go through point for point, get some conversation and direction and feedback from the council. This is just direction. I will come back as the town manager in a future meeting, again, for your review and ultimate approval of any changes to the rules and procedures. Is that okay to approach
Sounds
that way?
great, yeah. I'd actually like to go through these point by point, because,
Okay,
Yeah.
absolutely. And again, these are just what there's a couple that I missed and I want to add at the end, but if there's anything else that jumps out at you, please let me know and I'll add it to this list and we can discuss it. The first one is section 3.3. It's on page 7.
actually, you know what, Todd, now that I'm thinking about it, in order to, for us to be able to have an adequate back and forth and be able to kind of maybe make a decision and move on, I wonder if we should have public comment now. That way, when we come back, we can hopefully get through this a little bit quicker. Is that all right?
I appreciate that,
Okay.
absolutely.
Is there any member of the public who would like to speak to this?
Why not?
Okay, Dr. Bundy.
Yeah. Bob Bundy. I've been involved with a large organization that frequently did retreats. I found them very productive if you have someone that's really leading the group and considering all options. And I think this would probably be something that would be very beneficial to the council and to the town of Corte Madera.
Okay, thank you.
Can I ask Bob a question?
Sure.
Is someone who's involved in town committees, do you have any preferences between Robert's Rules of Order or Rosenberg's Rules of Order?
I'm more familiar with Roberts.
Okay.
Thank you. Any other member of the public like to speak to this? See none? Let's bring it back and hash these out one at a time.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. The first is section 3.3. It's page 7 of the rules and procedures of the council. And it's the manner of addressing the council at open time and the time limit. And again, if any speaker wishes to address the council for more than 3 minutes, the presiding officer, the mayor, may allow more time for discussion. Currently, the current mayor and all past mayors follow this procedure. There has been, surprisingly for me, over the last 10 months, a lot of comments from community members that would like to see us consider having a hard 3-minute stop unless there's a special circumstance to allow it further. There are times where, I think this council allows the community to get their feedback and input and sometimes follow-up input. It's just a point, it's a comment that has been made from community members, actually. And so that's why I did list it, and I thought it was important to just bring to the attention of the council for consideration and conversation.
I'm rather surprised it's community members that brought this up.
Yeah.
Okay. Thoughts? Yes,
I mean,
Jim?
Well, this is just the general open time comment. I think 3 minutes should be more than adequate.
Yeah, I think it was the 3 minutes. It was the rebuttals on any given item. A lot of times, the comments or observations were that we allow the same person to come up and make a rebuttal or an additional comment. It has happened in hearings and so forth, and so that was the observation that was made.
Oh, okay. You're mixing two different things.
Yeah.
One is the open time, 3 minutes that we do first thing at the council meeting. And then the other one is when we're discussing an issue, when we want people to come, express their opinion. So,
It's happening in both instances,
okay.
and they're both 3 minutes that we allow, and so it's the same observation in both instances. That we're allowing people to go past 3 minutes, and we also at times are allowing people to come up and make rebuttal statements.
For instance, this evening, we had somebody who had a question after we had discussed, but it was a good question.
Yeah.
And I think it actually helped further the conversation I know we don't want to encourage people to get up there numerous times, and I think if it was seriously being abused, I think we could nip that in the bud. But I personally
It was useful information.
have, being up here and having to cut people off, I don't want to be, completely rude by insisting on a hard stop or insisting that somebody who has something really important to say, maybe if we don't have a ton of people in the audience, we have the time to, incorporate a second, very quick additional comment. So I don't know, I'm kind of torn. Bob?
Yeah, the last thing I want to do is do anything that's going to squelch public comment, because I think it's really important. Having said that, I think that the reason we're hearing from members of the community on this, I think, and tonight there's only a few people here, right? But there are many times when we have a major agenda item and it's back, even if it's the first or second item on the agenda, right? And everyone's here for that item. And nothing upsets people more than sitting in a room waiting for us to get to that. And I think as a general comment, the more things we can do at the beginning of the meeting to clean it up and move it faster so that we can get to the public's business, so that we can get to what people are here for, right? The better off we are. So I understand this comment, I understand where it's coming from, and I think it makes sense in that respect.
So what would you do in an instance like this evening where we were having a discussion, and somebody who has a vested interest in his business that, and wants to provide an additional comment, in this case, it was really kind of asking for a clarification. What would you do? I mean, would you advocate
I thought-
allowing him to
I thought what
say
you did
something real
tonight was
quick?
absolutely appropriate. I'm interpreting this more as open time at the beginning of the meeting, when sometimes we get, numerous people who want to speak, and they go longer than 3 minutes, and they think they should be able to go longer than 3 minutes. When we have business items that a lot of people have shown
Okay.
up for and are
Right.
here to talk about, and they want to hear, and instead, they feel like their time is being taken by other people, when the rules of the meeting say that we shouldn't be doing that.
Great.
That's more my point.
Sloan?
I agree with Bob. I think Bob's larger point is the sequencing, right?
Of agendas?
I mean, I think we already have the ability. I don't know how we can maybe artificially make ourselves do it. Bob's got a solid point that we are not particularly good at prioritizing matters which have large numbers of people to come first. I mean, I've only been on the council for, 5 years or whatever, but we're just not that good at doing that, and that would go a long ways towards making people feel like we are responsive to their time constraints. This particular, I think that, and that's not one of the things on your list, which is how to sequence things, but it's a smart point, I think, Bob, that I agree with, and maybe we all do, is that maybe we ought to be in the habit when we've had a lot of them in the last year or so, but meetings where it's like overflowing, maybe we do at the beginning. Sometimes we do this, we do a show of hands, and then we like resequence things or something, and so we hit the big ones first, because then people are less waiting around while
Right.
other things happen.
On that point, I would actually like to ask our town clerk, Rebecca Vaughn, a question. I know when we first got the new agenda software that was part of the website update and everything, I know it's difficult to kind of rejigger things in terms of public hearings and business items and presentations. I mean, the software is set up that presentations are at the top, public hearings are always agenda item number 6 with sub-numbers, and then the business items, those are number 7, and that we can't move business items up unless we do it at the beginning of the meeting. Is that still the case, that we don't have the opportunity to kind of reorder those
I
kinds of
didn't think
things?
it was a hindrance of the agenda product itself. It was just that's how our agenda is laid out in the rules and procedures, actually. There's a section
Okay.
in the rules and procedures that lays out the agenda format with that specific order. And I was under the impression that business items couldn't be heard before public hearing items, et cetera, because that was the way it was laid out in the rules and procedures, although I could be wrong.
You know, I have one thought about this. If you wanted to do something about the people blowing through the 3 minutes, we could impose a hard stop, and then we could, I think we enjoy the authority under at least Robert's rules to then take a vote after all the 3 minutes have been exhausted for the people who want to speak. We can vote to allow additional open time minutes, but it's kind of like a pain in the ass to do that, and consequently, maybe it would be discouraging of people to go beyond their 3 minutes because of the riskiness they wouldn't get to talk more. I don't know. The sort of the takeaway from today's items is that we need to do things to try to shorten the meetings, I'm guessing.
Yeah.
So anything that we can do to maybe encourage that, maybe we ought to.
Carla?
Yeah, I think it's kind of subjective, and I think that today, you permitting Mr. Grelnick to come back with the question was completely appropriate. When I think that it opens a can of worms is when we've got standing room only on a really controversial subject, and everybody is very anxious, and then somebody says, oh, wait, I just have one more thing. And that then, just by the rules policy, means that we have to reopen it to everybody to speak. And so I think that just being able to use it at the mayor's discretion, I think is safer, rather than to put, make it a written in stone type of a policy, because I think that then we won't be able to adhere to it. And by the same token, with if we wanted to change an agenda, which we've done a lot of times, that it's just at the beginning of the meeting, we hear a motion to alter the order of the agenda, and it seems to work fine. I just worry about putting too many things in stone might be counterproductive.
I agree with you. I think it might be counterproductive depending on the circumstances. So I will say one thing. I'm not sure people are able to really track these timers. Is it possible to get a better timer? Okay, even if we could have, a little app that we could have on the screen so it takes up the entire screen and you could really.
Yeah.
But it is.
You,
Well, actually,
you know how they do it at like almost every presentation at the big centers. They have
Yeah.
a little box with a green and a
know.
yellow and a red, and it is brutally obvious. You can see the color beaming up at the person's head as they're talking. And when it goes from green to yellow,
Yes.
then the audience gets excited because they know that dude has to be almost done.
You're into colors, aren't you? I'm going to open the blinds next time and see we can see you in Smurf blue.
Madam
But
Mayor,
that
that's
would
exactly
be-
what I was just going to say. I was looking into, because the problem comes up with generally in planning items where they have large displays. I can't have access to the screen during their presentations,
Right.
and then I end up using my phone, which is problematic as well. So I was looking into a system that would either go on the dais or on the podium that would be red, yellow, and green.
Okay, or a countdown clock is fine too. It would be handy if we could see it as well.
Right.
So if they have, I've seen the digital, it looks like a giant 1977.
No, but it's a good point. Just make it
Digital
brutally
clock,
obvious.
but we'd
Whatever it
want to
is.
see it on both sides. And if there's a ding, make it loud. Jim?
I'd like to do a distinction between open time, which is what we do first thing in the meeting. Make that a hard 3 minutes. Get the hook out and pull them off the stage at 3 minutes for that. But when we're talking about comments, public comment on business items, I'm less sanguine with a hard 3 minute cutoff, particularly if we're talking about any sort of planning issue, because usually you're giving somebody 3 minutes to talk about zoning, 3 minutes to talk about how beautiful or ugly the building is, 3 minutes to talk about density. unless we're gonna.
Over 3 separate meetings.
No, this would be at one meeting, we get this fur ball delivered up, and everybody's got a comment
So,
on it.
Diane, may I say something? Jim, I don't disagree with the concept you're going at, but I disagree with doing that just for complexity's sake. It's easier to say to everybody in the whole room, you have 3 minutes, and to have that consistently applied regardless. So whether it's a hard stop or a not a hard stop or whatever it is, if you introduce, it is a hard stop for the open time and it's not a hard stop for the main part, it introduces a complexity that to me just becomes a little unworkable.
Then I would like to ask my fellow council members who are advocating for a 3-minute hard stop, how do you recommend we enforce a 3-minute hard stop? Do we turn the mic off?
Sorry, we really appreciate your comments, you're done.
Yeah, I know, thanks. You-
That's how you do it, done.
No, I get it. All right, so,
But I think that we ought
there are
to,
certain circumstances where that will not be
well, I
taken
think,
hold on,
Oh, sorry.
by the public. And I think historically, you and me and previous mayors have always said, your 3 minutes are up. Can you please wind it down? Can you finish that thought and let's hear from the next person? So we try to gently say, your time is up, finish up, without, raising
so
people's ire.
that has always been my practice. I believe it's courteous and I think it's appropriate. On the other hand, we got to do something. We got to do something.
Right, and I also want to point out, occasionally, our agendas just are brutal. There are occasions when we just have a lot of really big items of interest to lots of people in the community.
Okay, maybe we can find time in these other things.
All right, okay. So,
I would keep it at a hard 3 minutes.
hard,
Hard.
hard.
I agree with Sloan. I think that's, you get, certainly for open time. And I understand your point about complexity, so I'd agree with you on that. We gotta do something, and when we got a bunch of people that wanna talk, we gotta figure out a way to get to them. And again, to my earlier point, people are coming here usually for a specific reason, and when they see things stacking up at the beginning of the meeting, all we do is increase the anxiety level of them, right? And they're about why they're here.
Yeah.
It makes for, a less constructive meeting atmosphere.
I'd like to ask the town attorney if do we run into any sort of Brown Act issues if we move something from the third from last to right at the front of the agenda? Sit there and say, right after public comment, open time, okay, we're moving all the 7s up front and pushing everything else back.
No, you have no issue with that from a Brown Act
As
standpoint.
long as we all vote and agree to, okay.
Yes, you have some rules to follow, and you can change those rules, but you have some rules to follow about the procedure for doing that. But
Okay.
you can move it. I would say if you are making a request that you would like to see routinely, item 7 in front of another item, that I would suggest that you change the rules so that what staff presents you is in order, because taking the time to make those kinds of motions at every single meeting will just, again, eat up more of your meeting time and actually potentially take up more time than you're saving by moving things around.
Can I ask one question about that? Assuming that we adopt this hard stop, don't we still have the authority to make a motion if somebody obviously has some critical piece of evidence that we want to all hear, to say, I'd like to move that we extend the time for all people by 1 minute or something, whatever it is, or for Miss So-and-so by 1 minute?
Yes.
Okay. So
Yes, you do.
let's do the hard stop and just see how it goes, guys.
Well, we can also just simply be a little stricter in enforcement and try that first before we encode hard stop into our rules. If we look at how the wording is listed on the agenda under open time for public comment. It says speakers will be limited to 3 minutes. We could maybe change that. Speakers will be strictly limited to 3 minutes. And, I, as mayor, will maybe have to start telling people they will be strictly limited to 3 minutes. Right up front, before I invite people up.
The suggestion I make is, why don't we go through the other comments in this section and then come back and summarize where we are in each of them? Because I don't think we have a chord on this one yet.
Okay,
Is that all right?
sure. All right, that was one.
Okay, moving right along. Section 4.10, page 9. With the help of the town attorney, we brought up the topic. This isn't a complaint, actually, or a comment by anyone. It was just an observation. There are 2 popular rules of order. We use Robert's Rules of Order. It is complex for new board and commissioners and council members. I was looking at one staff report. I don't know if this is accurate, but another city's mentioned that Robert's Rules of Order, edition 11, has over 816 pages of information. And so it's very complex. With the help of the town attorney, we have a recommendation for consideration. It's something that is recommended by the League of California Cities. It's attached. It's to this report for your review. It is much easier how it's explained to me, and I'll defer to the town attorney on this, but it's basically the same. It's Robert's Rules of Order. It's the same, but it's a simpler version of it. So for process in reading it, I didn't see very many changes, but what I did see is for someone that's stepping in to your difficult role, you could go to a cheat sheet. There's a 1-page, and then there's 15-page attachment where you could go through it methodically, and it has everything that you need. And so that's just for your consideration, and if you have anything else.
I will just say that Robert's Rules of Order was created a very long time ago and really created for use by very large bodies, 50-member bodies, 100-member bodies, and it's very complicated, as you might imagine, for those bodies. Rosenberg's rules were intended to essentially simplify Robert's rules for bodies like a city council or a town council. There aren't any substantive differences. You're going to get the same place. I've never seen a difference, and it's the judge that created them trying to get to the same place substantively, but to do it in a much more user-friendly, straightforward way that is more appropriate and for a 5-member or a 7-member body like a city council. And so my recommendation actually is to go ahead and make the switch to Rosenberg's, not because it's going to change how you run your business. It won't, but it will be a lot easier for members of the public and for all of you and any new future council members or commission members to understand what happens. And truth be told, as the parliamentarian for you, my cheat sheet and my go-to is Rosenberg's. That's what I use, not because I'm trying to do something underhanded, but because it does get you to the same result. So I would just recommend that you give yourselves a break and be able to refer to a very short document rather than a very convoluted document that really was intended for Parliament.
And other cities are using Rosenberg, so we will not be the first.
You are not the first, and the League of Cities does suggest Rosenberg.
Okay, and I just personally wanted to point out, in case you guys didn't notice, Rosenberg is a Superior Court judge in Yolo County, and he was previously on the Davis City Council and served a couple of terms on the Yolo County Board of Supervisors. So I think he knows what he's talking about. Yes, Carla?
On 2 of the committees that I serve on, they use the Rosenberg Rules of Order, and it's so much more user-friendly. And just like Teresa said, it just makes everything flow easier, and everybody isn't hollering out point of order and all this kind of stuff every other minute. It's just a much easier guideline to follow. And I would certainly be happy to make that change.
Okay. Sloan?
I think we're all in agreement, right? Agreed.
Okay.
Let's move on.
Over here?
So we have a consensus, Rosen?
All right.
Okay.
Section 5.1, this is the big bold for me as a recommendation of staff to the council to consider. again, not surprised, I think a lot of people in the community discuss start and finish times, how long our council meetings are, and as the mayor said, we have a lot of stuff to discuss sometimes, and our council meetings go long. But in looking at the other cities and towns in Marin County and in the Bay Area, really talking to other council members outside of Corte Madera and town and city managers, really what a lot of them gone to is 6:30 and 7 o'clock start times. For the ones that do a 6:30 start time, what I found is 50% of them still have closed session items before 6:30, and the other 50% approximately do it at the end of the meeting. And so that was a question I had regarding closed session. I did individually kind of survey each council member. 4 were comfortable with a 6:30, considering a 6:30 start time. And 1 is potentially 7, so I know we all work, and so it's an issue of getting to the council meetings, but I think there is potentially some conversation to be had with lowering the start time. I also went back and I looked at approximately 90 to 100 council meetings.
Our council meeting?
A number of council meetings.
Oh, my God.
Outside of our town and within our town. And something I focused on, and I talked to other council members and a lot of city and town attorneys, city town managers. And one of my questions was, and one of my observations kind of confirmed this in my mind, but it's for you to believe it and ultimately direct that. But any meeting that was outside of 3 hours, you really saw difficulty in decision-making, and the council struggled at times. Staff definitely struggled. I'm used to going to bed at 9:30, so anything past that, I have a hard time. But going back and reflecting on our meetings and watching them, I really focused after 3 hours. I would go into the meeting with the video and focus at hour 3 and see how they did, and then I compare it to hour 1. And you see a big difference. And something I noticed in the comments of the community, they really struggle when they're there. I mean, if we sequence, that's going to be helpful because we can help, members of the community that are here for a specific item and have it heard up front. But a lot struggle sitting there until 11:30 to hear their item. And that just comes with the territory. So what I found, and I was surprised, Larkspur, Tiburon, Sausalito, Ross, a lot of them, Mill Valley, a lot of them have a 6:30 to 7 o'clock start time. And they have a stop time of 9:30 to 10 to 10:30. And so if you want to extend it, it's a majority vote to extend it a half an hour, and it's a full vote to extend it past that. So the concept seems logical, a best practice, and reasonable. What I am recommending for consideration is a 6:30 to 9:30 council meeting, a 3-hour council meeting with that rule in effect where we can extend it with a majority vote of a half an hour, or potentially a full vote to extend it past that, again, or a 7 p.m. to 10 p.m. normal council meeting time, 3 hours, again, with the same thing where you could extend it if the council votes to do so. There's a handful of times, we had a conversation with our cohorts in Larkspur. They've had a handful of meetings past 10:30 over the last 12 months, and those were appeal hearings. There's exceptions to the rule, but we know in advance staff can handle the agenda, so we don't give you a full agenda where you can hear that item, and we can get a consensus by council at the end of it within a reasonable time period. But this is the recommendation. I'm happy to answer any questions, but this is the norm. A lot of councils and boards try to focus on a 3-hour window to get the community's business done, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay.
Oh, I thought you were raising your hand.
No, sorry.
I was
Sorry.
pointing to
just-
Diane. I
was
thought you
just
had raised your
stretching my
hand.
fingers.
That's what I thought you were doing.
Would you like to speak?
Sorry.
I'm okay with it.
With 6:30 to
6:30 to 9:30. I don't know who, somebody's got to work. That's fine, whatever. I'm okay with 6:30 to 9:30 and then a votes to, exactly as recommended.
What do you think of closed session, though? If we need to have a closed session,
Let's
could
take
we
it
have
as it comes. Next time we have a closed session, let's ask around who wants to do it early, who wants to do it late, and then you can make a decision. I'll go with whatever you like.
Okay, Carla,
I'm okay with any of the times.
did you want to say something?
I would just say that sometimes your closed session, you're going to have the same staff. You will have me, and so it probably doesn't make a big difference. But sometimes you are going to have either an outside labor negotiator or you're going to have an outside attorney. And I would highly recommend that you put those closed sessions in front if you can do that. You don't want to be paying counsel to sit here. And even if counsel doesn't show up for most of the meeting, there's a little bit of a, you don't want to be an outside attorney and show up 45 minutes later than you should have. So you're going to have to show up a little early, and then you're in a position of having an attorney sit through some of your meeting. And so that's just a bad spot to put the attorney in. It's not a great thing in terms of getting a bill. The attorney's not going to want to bill you for that. And then you're also asking that outside counsel to potentially come here at 10:30 at 11 o'clock at night for a 20-minute, 30-minute meeting. So again, that isn't an issue for me. I'm here anyway. So that's something to really consider when you have your closed sessions. Also, labor negotiator as well.
Okay, so if we change the start time to 6:30, and we needed an hour, say, for a closed session, that puts it at 5:30. That does make it difficult for somebody that works, say, a 9 to 5 in the city.
Particularly depending on what the traffic gods say.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
Now, 6 start time,
right,
and by 6, I mean 6 for the executive
for the closed session.
closed
Yeah.
session. That would be tight, but doable.
Right.
Madam Mayor, members, at just a point, we could, if we had an hour, it depends what the item is. We could always put it at the front of the meeting or at the end of the meeting, so we could always pull the council and figure that out. If we had an hour item, which we normally don't, it's usually half an hour, but if it was an hour, we could do 30 minutes up front and 30 minutes after. We've done that as well. We have full flexibility on any range of issues, just for consideration that it is something that staff can always pull the council depending on the issue and time that with your schedule well in advance to provide options. It's just.
Couldn't you also put on the agenda that the closed session might be 6:30 till 7, and then the public meeting open, is it 7 or 7:30 or whatever, so that you wouldn't have to split up the closed session, but you could have it early and just show on the agenda that the open meeting is a little bit later.
You could certainly draft your rule to allow for that. I think perhaps the concern, if there is one, would be that it may be confusing to members of the public who routinely like to come to a council meeting that aren't sure whether the public part, certainly there's a small public part before you go into closed session. Many members of the community choose not to come for that. And so what I mean by that is when you return back to the open session and then hold the public parts of that, certain members of the community may be confused about what time it's really going to start. So, but that's certainly within your discretion, and we can draft the rule to allow some flexibility there.
Jim?
I know in the past, before Todd's office got redone, folks were left out in the rain, literally, waiting for the executive session to end. So if we continue to have the executive meetings in Todd's office, then we can have this room open so folks can come in and get out of the weather, and then we'll just come in, when the executive session's over.
Right, closed session, right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And we'll continue to follow that procedure.
Right, but I'm just saying,
because now we have a conference room we can meet in.
exactly.
Yeah.
So it,
Thank you.
it's less, pressing that we have a super hard stop, for the closed session at a certain time. We have some flexibility.
All right, Bob, you have anything to add?
Great suggestion, all for it, 6:30 is fine with me.
Jim, could you handle a 6:30?
For the meetings, yes. For the closed meetings, depending on what my schedule's like, it could be difficult, but
Okay. What do you folks think down here?
Agreed.
Yeah.
6:30 or 7?
6:30. I don't want to make life difficult for Jim, but I'm the earlier the better for me.
I'm easy to go with the flow on
Well,
that.
let me just throw something out there. I mean, there will come a point when we are no longer on the council. I mean, we need to think about future councils. And if there are people that are working and have to commute, is a 6:30 start time potentially going to turn them off because they think they might not be able to get here?
They could change the time.
My single
Well, not
biggest
if they're ki-
complaint with the timing is not when the meeting begins, but the length that the meeting takes. So
Got it.
my family life would probably, and my work life would probably be improved if I got out of here quicker rather than when I started. That'd be my own sense.
Right.
If I may comment on that?
Hold on, Carla made a comment
sorry.
about, what was, you were saying?
Oh, I would just go with the flow, whatever.
Right, but if somebody is thinking about
Oh,
running for
oh, oh.
council, and they're
Then-
saying, oh, the meetings start at 6:30, I don't know if I can get to 6:30 meetings every time because I work in the city. I mean, I just worry that that might turn some people off.
Think how much time we give every month, Diane.
But,
I know.
but at the same time, they
Bob's
should
trying to say
know
something.
that
Right, sorry,
council could change the time again.
true. Bob,
Lots of other towns are doing it successfully at 6:30, and they're not having a problem getting people to do it.
okay. All right. I think we can do 6:30.
When-
What about the tail end? 6:30 to 9:30?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
And then you were, Todd, you were thinking a two-step process at 9:30, majority vote to extend a half hour, unanimous to extend beyond 10 o'clock.
That's correct.
And when do we start this?
Next meeting. I was joking. As soon as
Yeah.
possible.
So we can bring back the rule changes, and as soon as the staff is able to put them together. Your current rule sets 7:30 as the start time, but it does give you the discretion to make a change. So if you wanted to, under your current rules, you could set that next meeting to start at 6:30 and essentially implement this part in terms of the start time. You wouldn't have all of the other procedures implemented, but there would be nothing to preclude you from taking a poll and deciding whether you wanted to adjourn the meeting within that period of time. So you could essentially run a meeting that looks and feels just like what you outlined before you change your rules officially, if you so choose.
So, what do you guys think? You
So
want to
that'd
start
be-
the next one?
So
You've
starting
got
August
somebody
15th?
from the audience is trying to participate.
Okay.
Is the 6:30 closed session, or is it the start, is it the start of?
Okay, we had a question. The 6:30 that we're discussing would be the start of the public meeting. Occasionally, we might have a closed session that we may have either prior to that 6:30 start time, or we may decide we want to do it on the tail end and hold that closed session after. We don't have closed sessions that often, but we do on occasion, and we would want a little flexibility. So, all right, do you guys want to start it with the next meeting? Or should we just have everything brought back at the next meeting? We'll vote on
I think
all the
we've got
changes
enough.
together and implement effective September 1?
We have a lot of other stuff for the next meeting.
Well, they're going to be bringing all the changes back to this document.
I'm just saying,
We can perfectly do it at 6:30 and not have any issues, if you so wish to do so.
Okay, does anybody care that strongly, or I'd say just let's implement all the changes at once?
Great.
Fantastic.
Okay, so we'll vote, you bring back the document next time.
Okay.
Well, assuming we vote to adopt it, it would be implemented with September's meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so that was section 5.1. Let's move on to 7.1.
Wait, there was one other thing though, right? Oh, I'm sorry, you're
We're
right.
still going through this. 7.1, which is
Yeah.
the order of business. And I'm looking at town council and town manager reports that you would put in bold here. Todd?
Yes, so section 7.1. So the comments again, were some comments amongst the council and community members. I did a little bit of research. I'm going to tie in this conversation here with the town newsletter because again, staff provides amongst the department heads weekly reports. The town manager's been asked to write weekly reports. We spend a lot of time on these reports. The town council obviously gives reports at meetings. So I'm going to tie these two together for consideration for you. But in looking at what other cities and towns do, again, it's 40% of the council, Sausalito, Larkspur, Tiburon. If the town manager or council members are to give a report, it's done at the end of the meeting, and it has to be done in writing. A lot of them do it in writing, and they do it on purpose because it carries over to the next day. There's after every council meeting, and a lot of school districts do this as well, the superintendents, they provide a newsletter, and so it has all the council member comments, and so they can forward that written document into the newsletter. The town manager and all the department heads also. It turns into our town newsletter on twice a month. And so, and really, I think that would actually free up staff time from doing the weekly reports. And really, I think the community would pay more attention to some of our messaging because it would be twice a month, and it would be really strategic because it would be from all levels of our government. And so maybe for consideration, some people have mentioned that they are videotaped now. I know a lot of times we want to get our message out. I want to get my message out when I have the most people in the room. It's at the start of the meeting. But now with video, I'm surprised how many people watch it and comment on it later. And so it's just a comment. It's for your consideration. But what I would recommend, regardless of what we do, of the timing and sequencing of that we consider maybe direction to tie in our council and town manager comments and do maybe a newsletter after every meeting. So Wednesday, we would put something out to the community. And so to consider that. And with that, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, thoughts?
I'll go.
Bob?
Same point I made earlier. We need to get to business items sooner for the public. We have to. And I think moving these reports to the back of the meeting, which is what Mill Valley does, which is I know what San Rafael does, I went through some of the agendas myself today, I think will help us do that. And I think, we're here to do the public's business for them. And I think the sooner we get to that, the better off we are. So I think this is a great suggestion. I also love your suggestion about eliminating staff reports and doing a newsletter. I think that's terrific because it comes out twice a month. And, you're right. It's a nice clean summary of here's what's happened, instead of, like 10 pages of meeting minutes, which a lot of people don't want to wade through. I think that's a great suggestion also, so I think both of these are great.
Jim?
I agree. The only comment I didn't make is, can we get Kevin Kramer back to write his staff reports? Because they were so interesting.
For you.
I think those were actually rants. I don't think they were staff rants.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, Sloan?
Agreed on all counts?
Carla?
Yeah.
I am a little leery of eliminating the staff reports and pulling that into a newsletter because, there's some stuff in the staff reports, like, for instance, back when Kevin Kramer was writing his somewhat sometimes very humorous reports, it would be very informative about the condition of a particular sewer main or why this particular project is costing so much. Stuff that the public doesn't necessarily want to know. There might be occasional infrastructure-related things that, for whatever reason, we don't want to make public or we, because a decision hasn't been made or something like that. I don't know. But I just wonder if throwing them out and eliminating them entirely is really what we want to do. I will defer to you, but I want you to think about that and consider that there might be instances and certain information that we want to continue in a staff report rather than wrapping it into a newsletter. And that you should feel free to put that in memo form, say, but we don't necessarily need to get that every single week.
Diane, to add to that, just in thinking about it, if, if at the tail end, if anybody has an announcement to make.
Like something coming up?
Yeah. I just,
That was going to be my second comment. but yeah.
people don't always, number one, look at the newsletter. And number two, they don't look at the, watching 3 hours of the video of the meeting. And if it's something that's particularly timely, I think that it would be appropriate, and it could still be at the, at the end, but just so that it's there.
Well, I was actually wondering if we could put something up on the screens before the meetings or as like a screensaver type thing with upcoming events.
It's a great idea.
When some other cities and towns do that, and that's one of the options. It's one of the reasons why for announcements and comments from the council, it not only helps us transfer that to the newsletter because it's in your words, but it's something that councils do. They put it on the screen or they provide it to the citizens in the room up front. And so they announce it, so
Microphone,
they-
is your microphone on? Okay.
Get back in there. So they have, so they do this, so we can do that. So they provide that information up front, either on the screen or in the back of the room in a document.
We've got a
So we
public
can-
Okay.
question.
so we
Yeah.
do that.
Okay, I'm going to call, if there are no more questions right now, I'm going to open it up for another round of public comment now that we've kind of rehashed some of these. That gives you your opportunity at the microphone. State your name and where you live, 3 minutes,
Carol
hard stop.
Burke, Corte Madera, California resident here, almost 40 years. My question was the newsletter. Is it going to be via mail or electronically?
Electronic. And Rebecca, would you mind reminding everybody how they can sign up for the newsletter
And next door.
using the microphone? Oh, was that your only comment?
Yeah, and how
Okay,
does
thank
the
you.
public then get
Okay.
knowledge of that?
Thank you, Madam Mayor and Council. On the town's website, there is a bar on the left-hand side of the homepage, and one of the items that you can click on is Notify Me. I apologize. Stay informed is the
On the
option.
left, in the dark box, third item down, stay informed.
And if you click on that, you can log in, create an account, and you can register for any number of automated blasts from the town, from news flashes to job announcements to emergency notifications and the newsletter, and notifications of council agendas, planning commission agendas, et cetera. And all you have to do is once you set this up once, you'll receive an automatic email that will ask you to confirm your subscription. And once you confirm, then you can make changes as you wish, and you're on the list to receive all of the notifications that you request.
Great, thank you. Is there any more public comment? No? I'll close public comment.
If I may, through
Okay.
the mayor.
Yes.
My apologies. I just wanted to clarify the start date of the new rules. Your current rules require 2 readings on rule changes.
Okay.
In addition, your start time is set in an ordinance, although, as I mentioned earlier, that ordinance does give you flexibility to make changes on a meeting-by-meeting basis. And so changes to ordinances also require 2 readings. So if you wanted to wait until all of these rules were officially in effect before you change your meeting time, you would be looking at a meeting time change no sooner than the beginning of your first meeting in October, because you only have 1 meeting in September.
Okay. Is that time frame okay for everybody? Are we in a rush to implement this?
It's okay with me.
It's good, whatever.
Okay. Now,
Yes.
getting back to section 7.1, because I'm not sure we ever really outlined exactly what we were doing with that. And then after that, I want to return to 3.3. So section 7.1 is the order of business. We're going to move town council and town manager reports to the end. We will be submitting in advance of the meeting in writing our reports. I would encourage everybody to please try to be concise with your reports, and, you know, even though it'll be in writing, I think it'd be best if we kept it fairly concise. All right, are we okay with the rest of this order of business? Would we want to move items 7 and 8 up? Although, wait a second, it says, oh, this is just a slightly different numbering system than what we use for the agenda. Would we want to,
Commendations, rather.
what's that?
Commendations and presentations are.
What about commendations and?
No, I said that's why it's different.
Well, actually, we have call to order and salute to the flag are together on our agenda as number 1. And then we have open comment. We normally do number 2. Presentations is normally 3. Town manager and council member reports would be 4, but we're moving that, so that would make consent number 4. And it would make public hearings number 5, business matters number 6, town council member reports would be 7. And then agenda would be 8. Draft agenda for the subsequent meeting. Number 9 would be minutes.
I'd like minutes to be moved into the consent calendar and to have draft minutes distributed to council so that we can do the markup there and then have a more final draft in the packet. Because, sitting here watching somebody proofread something is a waste of time.
Well, usually people arrive with their changes. I would like to ask if that would be more of a burden on staff, because I'm concerned about that.
No, Madam Mayor, I don't believe it would be a burden on staff at this time. Usually, following any given council meeting, I receive the draft of the minutes from the transcriptionist anywhere between 4 and 5 days after the meeting, at
Oh,
which point,
okay.
sometimes longer, depending on if we have a 4-hour meeting or so. So given that time frame, I could foresee being able to possibly send the minutes out on Friday or Monday at the latest, and then you would have, at a minimum, 3 or 4 days to look at them before we would need them back for the packet.
Okay,
But we can work on getting a hard return time on the draft minutes if that was something that you were interested in pursuing.
And we agree. I think it'd be a good addition for the council. I'll give you time to look
All right.
at it.
I'm totally open to that, if folks think they can get to taking a look at the minutes during that.
Makes sense to
Window.
me.
Whatever you like.
All right, let's do that. So then, 9 would be adjournment.
Let's put that last.
I was
So-
thinking we could move that one up.
You want to just make it call to order, salute to flag, and adjournment?
Just kidding.
Okay, so, number 1, call to order and salute to the flag. Number 2, open time for public comment. Number 3, commendations and presentations. Number 4, consent calendar, including minutes. Number 5, public hearings. 6 is business matter. 7 is town council and town manager reports. 8 is the draft agenda for the next meeting. And 9, adjournment. Everybody good with that? Okay, let's go back to 3.3.
Anything else, sorry, Madam Mayor? For
Yes.
7.1, would it be helpful, and maybe through the town attorney, to put some just brief summary language of sequencing, that it just kind of speaks to it of when you get into a council meeting and you realize there's a big group that's at the end of the agenda and you want to move them up, that you have the latitude to sequence and move that up? Would that be helpful? Or is this the area?
Just
Okay.
that the code shall allow flexibility to adjust the
Yeah.
agenda as the mayor and council sees fit.
Do we need to put something in the agenda to reflect the fact that this order is not set in stone?
You don't need to do that. You retain the discretion to do that. And I believe you have a rule about moving the agenda. So we'll take a look about moving items on the agenda. I think I believe the mayor has discretion to do it herself. But if the mayor doesn't do it, I believe there is a process for a majority to do that. But I will confirm that. If that rule doesn't exist, is that a rule that you would like to be incorporated?
Okay.
Both the mayor's discretion as well as the majority to have the power if the mayor doesn't choose to do it.
By the way, if you're interested, I have exhaustive and annotated commentary about the ability to switch the agenda under Robert's Rules of Order at the beginning of the meeting, because we suffered some fairly anal brothers and sisters on the Marin County Council of Mayors and Council members who challenged that process, and so I have that dialed in. And if
How
you,
about under Rosenberg rules of order?
and so I'm happy to share that with you if you would like.
But we're following Rosenberg.
Okay, so
all the same.
maybe it's even yes.
Thank you.
One other addition, and it's not something that I think that we need to put into the rules, but it's, if you're okay with it, it is an addition, and I'm sorry that I didn't add it, but there was some discussion amongst council members as well of putting, as staff, to put estimates for each agenda item.
It's a great idea.
And I think it would be helpful, and I think of the appeal hearing and a couple agenda items on the last agenda, which I think there's nothing worse for staff and the council to have a very long conversation and have to continue something because you don't have enough info. And I think this may help us on both fronts of it. Hey, we have 20 minutes for business items. Staff doesn't think it's a big issue, but council gets 10 minutes into this conversation. It becomes really clear there's some confusion and council needs additional information. And that we could maybe, when we get to that point of just kind of stopping for a second and saying, hey, I think this is something we're going to have to continue and give direction to staff to bring back further information. I think this putting times is one area that I identify. It may be helpful to us. And so if you're okay with it, we'll start estimating times. Not that we're held to it. It's just a check and balance and something I estimate for 15 minutes and it becomes a much larger conversation and you need additional information. At least it gives us that stop button to evaluate what information you need and bringing it back for a future conversation without putting you through an hour of conversation.
I am concerned about that only because I fear that members of the public will look at that as a guideline for when to arrive or when they'll be able to leave or when to tune in
That's
or
a
when
good point.
not. And sometimes those estimates are wildly off. And I'm a little concerned about that. Unless you think you can be pretty darn accurate. So, I mean, I'd
Maybe
be
you could give
curious
it
what
just to
fellow
the
council
mayor,
members-
right? Would that have to be revealed to the public?
No, it could
I'm
be.
sorry?
Maybe he could just give it to you.
Absolutely.
Okay.
We discuss kind of agendas anyway, and we know we have 3 hours, and it's something I think we would talk about anyways. Yeah, that's a good.
But does it have to be revealed to the public?
I think if it's part of your weekly discussion or biweekly discussion, then it would probably be a conversation.
Okay.
Can I ask a question to the group here, real quick? Do you guys think we debate too long? Do you think our discussions are too long? Do you think we're too exhaustive when we debate amongst ourselves?
No.
I think oftentimes we are very concise with our arguments, and we can get through it pretty quickly. I think most of the time when we are engaged in a real back and forth conversation that occasionally can be time consuming, it's because it's a difficult issue.
Okay.
And I actually think that's what we should be doing personally. Down here?
I was going to comment on the timeframes. I was just going to point out 2 things. One, the school boards do use it pretty successfully, and they put it on all their agendas, and it does give the public some guidance as to when their item is going to be heard. But I also like it because I think it's a really good discipline for the town manager and the mayor, because it really forces them to look at the agenda and make sure we can accomplish what we're supposed to accomplish in the time that we set out. When you start really laying times out and you realize, wait a second, So I think it's a good exercise. If we don't want to reel with the public and just have it between the mayor and the town manager, that's fine. But I think as a process, I think it's a really good idea.
Okay. Jim?
I'm torn 2 ways. One, I'd like to see it, but, can we have an agenda and just when we come into the meeting, sort of, here's a timeline, here's a handout?
You know, we can make it part of the agenda. I mean, if we want to just put it on the agenda, that's fine, but let's make it really clear that it is a ballpark estimate. Just, I don't,
And that the
Or put
agenda
it at the
order may
back of the
change.
packet,
Yeah.
you know?
I have a problem with that going out on an agenda, because I think particularly when we're dealing with appeals, that people might feel they're not getting their day in court, that it might be too restrictive, and also we can't anticipate how many people will be in the audience. I think it's a good exercise for doing it with staff and the mayor to get an idea, an estimate of how much time the meeting is going to take. But I think that we're kind of walking on a slippery slope to actually have it written on an agenda.
You know what, though, can I say one thing about that, Carla? Every trial and every hearing I've ever had, the judge always warns you beforehand how much time you're going to have to do everything. And so there's no due process concern.
But we do have that as far as the time limit that's given an applicant and an appellant. Those are standard, but what I'm talking about is that there might be 3 people in the audience that are here to speak for that issue, and on the other hand, it might be a standing room only crowd, and so I think it's really difficult to accurately give that estimate until we see how many people are there, and if we have it on the agenda, it becomes record, and some people are going to feel that they aren't getting their appropriate amount of time.
Can I respond to that? You make an excellent point. You know, if there's 10 extra people and they get 3 minutes each, that's an extra 30 minutes. But I think it's important to note that the times are guidelines. They're not cast in stone. You know, so if we go longer, we go longer. And you're right, for an appeal, and if there's a lot of public comment, I think we need to make sure we do it. But what I also do like about it is the discipline of, I think, if you've got a time frame on the piece of paper in front of you, to your point about, you know, trial attorneys and what they have to do, I think everyone tries to work harder to try to make it work within that time frame and tries to keep things moving to try to get closer to that time frame. There's just sort of an unspoken force that is going to make you try to do that. So, and if we go longer, we go longer. I just think as a discipline, it's a good structure.
Well, I think it's fair and probably advisable to have the amount that, if it's an appeal, how much the appellant has and how much the applicant has, and then the time for rebutting, but to give an all-over time frame of what it's going to be on the agenda, I think is that it just can't be an accurate way of
I don't think
appropriating
anybody's saying
time.
it's going to be totally accurate. And I would also say that coming up with estimated times does not in any way negate what we have been doing every time we've had an appeal, and that is, at the beginning of the process, we kind of lay out how we're going to handle the appeal, staff report, questions, and then appellant gets so many minutes, applicant gets so many minutes, questions, public comment, each side gets a rebuttal of so many minutes, and that's always been laid out at the beginning. That wouldn't change. They'd each have their allotted minutes, but on the agenda, we could simply say, this agenda item, 45 minutes.
Okay, I'll tell you, I was looking at past planning commission meeting minutes, and one thing that I found disturbing was that a time allocation was given at the beginning, and it was going to be heard until such and such a time, and then it was cut off, a vote was taken, and there were other people still that didn't have an opportunity to speak. And that's just what I fear that would be stepping into or implying that that would be happening.
Okay, without knowing exactly which meeting that is, I think
So
it's
for the
difficult for us to-
appeals-
Hold on, Todd's trying to talk. Yeah?
That point in my thought process with this and looking at what others, It starts with staff of setting the agenda accordingly and how, moving forward, when we have appeal hearings, when we have items that are project nature, a Montessori school that is the next project coming before us, it won't be necessary to put timeframes on those because those are going to be single items, and so we're going to control the agenda much better so we can have a 3-hour meeting. And so on your specific concern of an appeal hearing, I don't forecast a necessary reason to put a time frame on an appeal hearing because it's going to be a single item issue. A perfect example would be like today's business items. These are all items that you can put timeframes to. They're appropriate, but as it refers to an appeal or a large project, I think that's how we're going to set the agenda working through the mayor of, hey, we should have one business item in the appeal for this meeting. Everything else, and it's going to come later, this is contingent on a variety of issues, but it's going to be the consent calendar policy. And so as long as we can do things in a multitude of ways, I think we can move forward and still meet your concerns regarding appeal hearings and large projects. Because again, they're going to be single item issues on that council agenda.
Okay.
I hope that answers that.
All right, so should we give it a try? List approximate times?
Yep.
Okay. What about the hard stop?
The hard stop.
I mean, if we
Or
do
going
the
back
other
to
We're back to
things,
3.3.
yeah, if we do the other things, why don't we just try to be better about that then?
All right,
I'm good with that.
okay. Now, we've got several other things. It is 10 o'clock, but we,
We did start at 7:30, Madam Mayor.
True.
These are much quicker.
proposals
think.
for new rules and procedures, other comments. Consent calendar policy. You wrote here, town council may want to consider adopting a consent calendar policy to include what items may be put on the consent calendar and procedures for removing an item. I don't think that's necessarily important to lay out. Is there a legal reason why?
I think staff is just looking for some direction about, generally, there's many jurisdictions have a rule that it needs to be something that's relatively routine. And so I think your town manager is looking for some direction about what kinds of things are appropriate to go on your consent calendar. You don't currently have a rule. And so just getting some buy-in. For example, you've now decided to add your minutes to the consent calendar. Are there other things that you think should be added to the consent calendar? Are there standards that the town manager should use about not putting things in the consent calendar? Of course, all of this is with the understanding that any item that is on the consent calendar that any one of you would like to discuss can be pulled off.
Right. Okay, thank you. Thoughts?
You know, we all read the packets, and it's not unusual for us to lift an item from consent calendar. I'm comfortable with having Todd just throw as much as he can in the consent calendar, and then to the extent that it seems right, one or more of us, or the public, or staff, on the moment can lift it. It's always struck me as a bit of a judgment call.
Okay. And I feel like judgment has been really solid
Yeah.
on what goes on consent calendar. I think you guys have got it exactly right, in my opinion. Carla?
Yeah, no, I agree. I have
Okay.
no problem with
I
that.
would concur.
All right.
Okay, thank you. I just want to make sure. Again, formalize an appeal process. The recommendation is that we continue as is. The last 3 or 4 appeals have been handled the same way. We talked about the structure. It seems to work. We're recommending that we actually formalize the appeal process that we've been following. I think it'd be helpful for the council and staff as well as the appellants and applicants moving forward. And yes.
One favor I'd ask is, can you give us 2 weekends between when the documents related to the appeals are delivered to council and when it appears? Because if you expect a council person to go to the site, over a weekend, and you tell us at 5 o'clock on Friday, there's no guarantee that the schedules can be arranged between the appealing party, the applicant, and all the council people. So I'm just asking
Yeah.
as a favor, can you
We've just
give us more notice?
We'll do our best. We've discussed it as staff. I mean, one of the issues, honestly, is with the appellant and the applicant.
Okay.
They're the ones that submit items last minute, as you know, to planning, and that's the issue, and a lot of times through the attorneys. And so we've been talking to the planning department in general of like, what are some things where we have a hard stop? You know, there's a deadline, but again, it goes into noticing, picking the agenda, and again, having a hard stop. And as you know, those packets are over 100 pages, and
Right.
it's really hard to give you 2 weekends to review something, but we're talking about trying to get our packets out on Wednesdays moving forward, and so that's a whole change in our process, and planning, the planning department is the last step, to your point, of you have to put a hard stop, you know, on that, and can we do that, and what does that look like? That is probably, to your point, maybe the best that we can do, giving you a Wednesday leading up to the following Tuesday on an appeal. I think might be our best case scenario right now, and that's going to be our goal moving forward.
Even, may I follow up on that?
Sure.
Even if it's just giving us the plans and a heads up, so that, let's say, maybe even the Tuesday before, you can make an appointment, go see it, and then read the rest of the packet as it comes in, but at least it gives you a few extra days to make that appointment, right?
Literally, yeah.
We can
Yeah.
do that. We can
Yeah,
do that, and I'll
something
make
like
an
that
effort.
might be really
Absolutely.
helpful.
Absolutely.
One other thing is, if we're expected to look at a site and the property lines are important, have the planning department get a survey done before we go up there.
Is that
and
expensive,
have it
though?
marked out.
The planning department isn't going to pay for the.
No, but what I mean is, you know, and if story poles are going up,
Kind of the point.
leave them up until the appeal process is done. You know,
I think we've had some lessons learned over the last few appeals that we're talking about specific to story
Okay.
pools and property,
Good.
and so we will.
Yeah,
we'll work
okay.
towards that.
All right.
Yes, thank
So-
you.
Okay. Anything else related to the appeal process? Okay, got it?
Okay,
All right, hold on. Are there any other proposals for new rules and procedures from council members? I had a couple.
Oh,
There were some previous councils that had discussed an issue related to council member attendance being an issue. And the town attorney at the time said that, you know, a council member cannot be removed from the council without a judge's order, so that wasn't going to be it. But I wonder if we might want to consider a process for censoring or in other ways laying out a certain level of attendance, conduct, whatever else that we might want from council members. Adherence to confidentiality, things like that. And maybe a process for censoring council members.
I'm happy to go along with that if you like.
I am too, but I also feel like we're maybe creating work at a time when we don't really have a problem. Unless there's a problem I'm not aware of.
Yeah, I've served on councils where there decidedly was an attendance issue, and yet nothing really was ever done about it. So far, with our present council, I don't think that that's ever become an issue with attendance. Everybody's really here pretty regularly unless it's
Oh, I
something
agree.
very
No,
legitimate.
it was in the past. In fact, it was,
Yeah,
it was in our packet. There were previous minutes. Hold on, I did indicate.
Don't we have a
but it-
rule
it
the
was
planning
many years ago.
commissioner, don't we have a rule the planning commission, it's like you miss 2 meetings without permission,
But
you're
that's
out
not
or
the
something?
council.
No,
That's
but
not-
I mean, maybe we want, is that what you're saying, something like that?
Yeah, but we cannot vote a council member off.
True, we can't.
The only thing we have is something like a censure, which is just a little slap on the wrist for, you know, bad behavior of whatever, whether it's, you know, poor attendance or what have you. Anyway, I just wanted to put it out there because we have nothing in here regarding that.
Maybe it's a
Other
good thing.
councils do, and I don't want to necessarily get into anything
Right.
too,
Is
Oh,
there
where was
something in
that? It was in here
Rosenberg's
somewhere.
rules about that?
This is one I'm going to have to look up. I haven't been asked this one before.
Maybe it's a good subject for the retreat, Diane.
all right. Yeah, I mean, we can certainly save this for another time. And I'm trying to see, I know I saw it in the packet. Where did I see that? There it is. Oh, it is the, attachment 1. I'm sorry. It's a staff report from, well, that's 2014. This is,
Minutes from May 1st, 2001.
thank you, May 1st, 2001. The bottom of the page, and it was policy regarding absences in excess of 60 days. And they were talking about council members made a commitment to attend meetings, yada, yada.
Can we dock their pay? I'm serious. You know.
Well, we can leave this for another time. We do not have to address this today. But I think it wouldn't be a bad idea to have something in here related to attendance, since it seems to have been an issue in the past. I would say, and other conduct, and I might say things like, not respecting confidentiality or other types of council-related conduct.
Okay.
And maybe we could borrow something from another city.
Always.
All right,
Okay.
so I will leave that to town staff to deal with. Should we go on to staff improvement and training, staff presentations?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. Just quickly, this is again a constructive criticism to staff, and we have trained staff moving forward and making an emphasis. Anyone that becomes before council, we will not read our entire staff report. We'll summarize and we'll cover the highlights. PowerPoint presentations, again, we won't read every bulleted item we put on there. A PowerPoint is used for unique information outside of what's been presented to council, so it could be it's a visual aid of something that we want to pass along to the council. And so those are two important trainings and points of emphasis that we're making. And again, item 3, if there's any other feedback either now or as we go, please, and you all do a great job, give me feedback on how we can do a better job, and it's really helpful. And so you guys are great at that. And so I just wanted to point those out in section 3, and if there's anything else you want to add to that. But I think we've covered it.
All right, any changes to that? Comments? Jim?
I don't want to change that, but I would warn you that many times if folks are watching it at home or on a video, this is the first time they're introduced to the subject. And so if you gloss over a lot of stuff, the viewer at home, will only be getting a smidgen of the information that's available in the
staff
report. And I don't know how to solve that problem.
I think the emphasis in our trainings of I'll continue to kind of fine tune this as we go. I think I can give some examples of where it got us in a little trouble, to your point, because I think there are more questions of the community and we had to come back as staff and cover that. But it's to take the fiscal impact, the background, how do we get here, the background discussion and the fiscal impact and the analysis, and you cover each of those sections, but you're not reading every word, I guess is my point. Okay. Sometimes if it's planning and it's planning related, I think, great presentation by Doug Bush the other night. You have to spend time on it, and I think they do a great job of it. But more along the items of Park and Rec, what you see from my desk, we can do a better job of highlighting again, but making sure we cover enough where someone that's never heard it before will have background, understand the fiscal impact, and know what we're working on with the analysis. That was my point.
Good.
But good, thank you. And please continue to provide feedback to me on how we can continue to improve there.
Okay, any other comments on that? I had one quick comment, kind of along the same lines as Jim's. Regarding PowerPoint presentations, you say it should cover unique information, not necessarily, and I'm thinking specifically about maybe a planning appeal. We need to be able to look at a plan or look at an illustration that might be in our packet as well, but is important to understand the project.
Thank
So
you.
that should be a guideline, but again, it's getting to presenting the information we will all need.
Thank you for the clarification, and I guess I just assume anything planning is outside the scope of everything we talk about. I
Yeah.
think it's more along the lines of the business items of the day, for like tonight.
Yeah,
So,
but like
thank
the
you.
skate park, I mean, it might have been in here, but everybody would want to see what it would look like anyway. So use your
Okay.
discretion.
Thank you.
All right, retreat. Should we hold a retreat? Last time we had one, I think Alexandra was mayor, and we retreated all the way to right here. So it's not like we go anywhere, but.
We had one with, we had one which was, I don't know if it was more like a joint session with the planning commission that kind of went badly. So, are you thinking a retreat just the 5 of us and staff, or a retreat?
When was that? It went badly with the planning commission?
Yes.
I don't remember that. What was the topic?
How they could do a better job.
So,
Yes, it was brutally clear to me. None of you remember this?
I
Oh.
do, yeah, I do.
so
I wasn't on council at the
Yeah,
time.
Madam, this came up, I think we're at a point in time where it'd be helpful, I think specifically for the council, but staff, to kind of reprioritize, some objectives moving forward. It would be really helpful for staff. The council has provided the town manager great support and direction with operational changes that over the last 8 to 10 months. But now I think they're much bigger pictures when we talk about, design review even, and we're talking, and these are I think there's some discussion points for us to have as a group. And I've been part of a few of them that have been really successful and some that have been really not so successful.
Yes.
Some of the ones that are held on a Tuesday or Wednesday night at 7 p.m. turn into, it just takes a life of its own. And the ones that I've seen that have been really successful, it's an open meeting, and so anyone can come, but really it's in a morning, and so it can be on a Saturday or Sunday morning. I'm actually recommending consideration, depending on your schedules, and we can look at it. We have one meeting in September, and so why don't consider possibly having a retreat in September, and depending on our schedules, do it in the morning. Do it first thing in the morning on a Monday through Friday, one of those days. And again, this is just a conversation to get on the same page. Staff will come back with what the council directs and discusses in a future council meeting at night, where the whole community will have a summary of what we talked about and our direction moving forward. So it's not something that necessarily it's open to the public, but really it's for the 5 council members, your town manager, your town attorney, if it's something we're talking about legally, there are issues. I would say our planning director. I think there's some things, for us to really just problem solve and work through together. And that's how I see it. The ones that have been successful have been like that. Larkspur, San Anselmo have done a few. They do it every other year, and it's been pretty successful. So I just put that out there as an option for you.
I'll go along with whatever you want.
Yeah, sounds good to me.
Sounds good to me.
I'd
Jim?
throw in that, as I recall from your contract, we have to come up with goals for you every year. And I think the only sane way to do that is for the 5 of us, you, the town attorney, sit there and be able to openly discuss items without, without knowing in advance what everybody else thinks, so.
That's a good point.
But that would be more a personnel-related process, which would be normally done in a closed session, correct?
So yes, but because your town manager is really implementing the policy direction that you're giving, I think what the town manager is asking for is just some clarity about the the policy direction and your policy priorities, I think that that may be a good first step to then have a closed session where you develop, as a personnel matter, a work plan and goals for your town manager's performance. But I think if you do the first step of what the town manager is asking in terms of policy setting goals, then that second step will be
Right.
much easier and can follow. If you wanted to do both at the same time, we would need to notice it, that second step, as a closed session and a personnel matter.
Okay, I think we should have them separate, and I think we should start with town goals. And then let's follow up with a process for your goal setting, and sorry about this, evaluation too, and
Yeah, that's coming up, and
It
we
is,
have,
isn't it?
there were 5 goals for us to accomplish, and just so you know, we've accomplished all 5 of those. So I'm looking forward to that meeting.
Can you believe
I'm just
it's
joking.
been almost a
I'm
year?
just saying, it's crazy, yeah.
Has it just flown by?
Shameless,
All right.
Todd, shameless.
Okay, so you want to throw out some dates over email, and we'll set something up for retreat?
Okay, thank you.
Right.
That's helpful.
Okay.
All right.
Which is the September-only meeting that we have right now?
So we cancel, I believe the day after Labor Day is canceled, the first meeting in September, so we have just one meeting in September, the second meeting. I think that's the
Oh,
19th.
So is it the third Tuesday?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
You'll send out calendar options. I coincidentally am away like the first couple weeks in September, so that may be awkward for me, but whatever. You don't probably need me anyway.
And I've got a board meeting in September, so I have to
Okay.
pull out my schedule and see when that is.
Okay. Got it for that? League of Cities.
Yes,
And when is that?
that is that Wednesday,
Okay.
Thursday, Friday, the
Oh,
day
okay.
after our meeting.
Got it, okay. All right,
The-
right. You got direction on that agenda item?
isn't it the
Okay, good.
The 13, 14, 15?
All right, you guys can work it out later. Review of draft August 15th Town Council agenda, which is agenda item 7.5.
Oh, yeah, the 15th.
I want to give a thank you to Rebecca Vaughn, Town Clerk, for mentioning to me, or bringing to my attention, a Nancy Hall Bennett, League of California Cities email that she sent out alerting us to the status of Senate Bill 35 in the state legislature regarding housing. So we may want to add an agenda item on consent for a comment letter. And I wanted to make a suggestion that maybe 2 council members work with staff to draft that comment letter.
Yeah, it's a really good point, Dan. I
Yeah.
saw that, I meant to mention that
Is-
email tonight, so I'm glad you brought that
So
up.
did I. Are you speaking one specifically about
Not on the right
no local control over
Peter
the
Bill.
houses? Yeah.
So, gosh, you 2 sure jumped on that. So how about you 2 draft the letter?
I'm sorry, I'm still reading this. You guys should feel
It-
free to
you
have
know
somebody
what?
else on the committee if you like.
Well, in my opinion, the 2 big issues surrounding that are, number 1, housing, which, Carla, you're all over that, and number 2, legislation. Gosh, Sloan, that's kind of your alley.
Okay,
Would it be possible?
sure.
I'm not going to jump into that one if I don't
Yeah.
have to, unless
We-
either of
we
you
can
want to
do it
volunteer.
Simply.
Okay.
And then
Yes.
she'll have a draft one anyway.
She will, yes,
Nancy,
yes. I'm
use
with
that
you.
as a basis. Her email today was really terrific, too.
Yes.
Yeah.
So refer to that, and use that as a basis, and then
Okay.
staff can help.
You got it.
And I think that can go on consent.
First crack.
Okay.
You want?
No, can we, yes, yes.
Sure.
The
I did-
consent, make it something with amendment, because we always have to fine tune it when we're writing the resolution.
Can that be part of the agenda item? I hear you, and I was thinking about saying the same thing, but I'm not sure we want to, is it okay to put
You see this?
in the staff report or on that particular agenda item, minor edits to be allowed?
think that's fine if the council is fine with that. I think if you mean non-substantive edits, then you might want to say that, but I think the edits that you were talking today were actually substantive.
Right.
I think that's up to you. I think you can certainly delegate that authority.
Okay.
I think we should, if we have substantive edits, we just pull it, and it does not take very long, and we just do it, and whoever wants those edits can explain what they want.
Okay,
Is that all right?
yeah.
That way, we're very clear on the agenda item, and we all
Okay.
know what the letter will be. All right, everybody good on the agenda? Oh, I did
I
want
got a
to.
question
Yes,
Yeah,
about Marin Montessori
yes.
being on this agenda. And I don't have an opinion on this one way or the other because I don't know enough about it to have an opinion. But my only question is, given that school traffic is such an issue on this area of town and that this is a school project, would it make sense to push this back to September 15th till after school goes back into session so that we have a better picture of what school traffic is like on Paradise as we evaluate this?
It's probably a
Well,
really good idea.
Don't we have traffic studies as part of the application, or?
There's studies in yours.
Yeah, it's
Well,
not.
hold on, I want to hear.
Eyes.
So to this point where I'm talking to the town attorney now, so let's just talk schedule. We did give Marin Montessori a heads up that we may push it back, and so
Oh.
we can do that. It doesn't, there's no financial impact to them by doing that, and I think there's some more thought to be had there to the point on the traffic impact. I've actually directed staff, our Public Works Engineering traffic team with planning to actually have a study of that entire corridor, because really we talk about a blueprint and then we have multiple projects out there, but the more we look at this corridor, it becomes the number one priority for our town to basically put an overlay of the menu of the pathways on the north and south side. What are traffic options through that corridor specifically? What are safety improvements that we can do? Put cost to it and have that ready in the next 30 days. And it's just a staff with expert opinions of the menu. It's not something we have to follow. I think, we would look at that moving forward. But I think it would be helpful when you look at the Marin Montessori project specifically and others, then at least as council, you have something as a condition of approval to say, hey, look, we can do a crosswalk. We're going to have you do A or B, whatever improvement it is. It at least gives the council some sort of menu to look at and consider and see the big picture that we're planning for, because there's flood control too on the north side. If we do a pathway, we may want to elevate that and we kill two birds with one stone, so to speak. And so I've asked for that to be expedited and have it ready, so it would be helpful to push the Montessori project back a little bit. But just so council knows, we have to also talk about the marijuana ordinance potential and any changes. And you don't want to go past in October for that. And so if we move that to the September meeting, we only have one meeting. We have the appeal pending. Staff has been working hard for the appellant and the applicant to talk and speak and negotiate, and they listened to council. And
This is
so
Crescent?
Crescent, and so they're working hard on the Crescent appeal. They're going to meet actually this weekend and try to negotiate that. And so we're hoping they may come to a resolution, and it could be something we could put on the consent calendar, actually. And so, but if not, you would have a potential appeal, looking at us in September or October. So what I'm recommending, if you're okay with it, we're going to try if we can. There'll only be a couple items on the August 15th meeting if we push Montessori back, which it sounds like there's some consensus there, to do the marijuana study and just do the study first and on August 15th. And it's kind of give you the menu of like what the issues are, what are other cities and towns doing, because from that study and those comments, then we can come back to you with some direction and recommendations. But we're going to want to do it sooner than later.
Great.
Is that-
Okay, see,
And it's gonna
this
be
is how we
fast.
wind up with multiple huge issues on one agenda. Is
It
just
is, but-
things get delayed and,
Traffic is such an issue out there.
I know, I know.
I feel like I want to really look at this after school's in session so I can see what it's like at 3 in the afternoon.
I think
I
we'll
get it.
also get, although we may turn up the temperature in the room, it will pull out both the immediate neighbors and then the parents and all that, because those groups will be more aware if we do it after school has resumed.
Yeah.
no,
But
I entirely agree. I just don't want I want you all to understand, this is how we wind up with the occasional brutal agenda. I mean, you guys know.
But I think the consent calendar will help us now,
Yeah.
because I've been reluctant to put some things on it, just for comfort of just trying to figure out the expectation, and I think now I have some flexibility, so.
And if we have a brutal agenda, we'll be ending at 9:30.
In the morning.
Sure.
That's
Yeah.
it, thank you.
Oh, yeah, you don't necessarily have to put PM on there. No, just kidding.
And we'll also have the presentation, the recommendation that you gave us too, the
Oh, for
accommodation.
Nancy?
Yes. So we'll do that.
Okay, and that's going to be the next meeting,
The 15th,
Right.
yes. Yeah, we'll get that on there.
For Nancy.
Nancy Fiedler. And that's just 2 minutes.
Is that an age
Tyler-
friendly?
Oh, and the Tyler contract will be on there as well,
Got
Madam,
it.
on the consent.
Okay.
Leaving, her husband's real sick. She's been
Okay. I did want to point out, on this agenda is also listed the JPA agreement for the fire authority. I should hope that would be very straightforward. Yeah, and the meetings for the fire consolidation ad hoc is online, and I believe we have links on our fire consolidation webpage. Do we have a link there to the Larkspur one also?
I might not have put the link up yet, but it's definitely on our YouTube page.
Okay.
It's linked on our website.
Great.
But on the fire consolidation page, I have to physically add the link to.
Okay, so give it a day and it will show up. Thank you, Rebecca. Okay, moving on, draft minutes of July 18th. Any changes?
I move we approve it?
Anybody from the public want
sorry.
to comment? I'm sorry, on either the agenda or minutes?
Right.
No? Okay.
So moved.
Second.
Councilmember Andrews.
Yes.
Councilmember Bailey.
Yes.
Councilmember Ravazio.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Condon.
Yes?
Mayor First.
Yes. Thank you all. Meeting adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.